The House will please come to order. All right, members, we still have a committee, I think, coming in, but let's reconvene ourselves. And we're going to begin our afternoon with just a privilege of the floor. The chairman of our courtesy committee, if you'll give your attention to Representative Duncan. Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm not sure if they've made their way up top, but they're trying to make their way up top all around us. All of our lunches so far have been graciously given to us in kind. And I've asked for the next 2 days for them to start showing up at 2 p.m. I strongly encourage that if you haven't gotten your thank you notes out, or at least go over and acknowledge them, please do so. But what we have today, I believe, is Waskop, Waskop, Brian Odecave Coven, Kelly Little, Brittany Butler, Jeremiah Riemann from Wyoming County Commissioners Association, Scott Myers from the Wyoming Banking Association, and Sean Taylor, Wyoming Rural Electric Association. So they're all here, and give them a huge thank you.
Thank you, Representative Duncan, and thank you to all those sponsors. We do appreciate it. It's made our work bearable. How's that? And enjoyable. How's that? So thank you very much. We appreciate it. All right, members, we're going to change our order a little bit, and because we've had there's a need to accomplish something that our colleagues down the hall have, and they've already addressed their joint conference committee on the budget, which is House Bill 1. And so at this time, we're going to just put it in the order and take care of House Bill 1. So with that, think how this goes. We're at that order of business of consideration of the joint conference committee reports. The first report for our consideration is Joint Conference Committee number 1 on House Bill 1, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, you should have 3 different documents in your box. The first one is a large, like 11 by 17. And what this is you recall we did an explanation last week that just had the differences of what the Senate did. This is a combination of Senate on top of the House. And if you go through the colors, and if you follow you can see where the amendments and the deleted and further amend. And so most of the time during the description today, this will probably be the easiest document to work from as we go through what these are. Okay. In addition to that, you've got a copy of the actual amendment. That looks like this, and it has that doesn't have it on, but this is what we sign as the bill, the actual budget amendment that comes for us, and this works through each individual amendments. You might recall that we had 24 House amendments. The Senate had 16, and so this does something with each of those 24 and 16, either by deleting, amending, deleting and further amending, or simply deleting. And so that's the actual amendment that takes on and that we're presented after we get it through the House today. And this is kind of a summary sheet that makes it even more simple. This summary sheet is a 1-pager, and it just goes boom, 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 and kind of describes in very general terms. And frankly, for when you're at home and if someone calls you up to go speak at the Rotary Club or something, this is a pretty useful document because it just makes it real simple. And it highlights the big picture. And then I'm going to kind of walk through a little bit of what we did, and we'll circulate this document as well to facilitate that process. So let's just talk again about how we got here today. The House adopted 24 amendments to the budget. The Senate adopted 16. And then there was about 8 more just net combined or that were kind of technical corrections. So, and the Joint Conference Committee, what did we do? We adopted 6 of the House amendments. We adopted 3 of the Senate amendments. We then went in and compromised on 10 of the remaining amendments. And when you do that, you delete and further amend. So in that chart, you'll see the D and further amend notation there. All right. And then eventually we deleted 12 of the House amendments and we deleted 9 of the Senate amendments. So that's what you have in front of you. Let's talk a little bit about the major actions that we took. So you can, as you hear it explained to you, you'll be able to fill this in and recognize it. So the House, if you recall, we restored a significant amount of the step 3 reductions on the Department of Health and Department of Family Services, roughly $18 million worth. The Senate did a few things similar, but not quite, to the just under 8 million. So that was really the difference between the two houses, was almost 10 million. And where we ended up now, as we go through this, is in our step 3 reductions that we put back in, it's about $13.5 million. So we're closer to our side than their side, but it was a pretty close compromise on it. So then the next big item you may recall is that our friends down the hall took 10 million from the grant dollars from the University of Wyoming and just turned around and gave it to the community colleges. So right there was a $20 million swing from our respective positions. And we gave 9 million to the colleges and 4 million to the community colleges. Well, what happened here, and this happened multiple times throughout this process. As we talked about it, and we've talked about it both in caucus and on this floor, the ARP program has certain requirements, and you can't spend below a certain, roughly 10% from previous budgets, and if you do, you don't qualify for funds. So as a result of that, our friends down the hall were more conducive to coming to our position because they had to not to lose funds. And so what was going to be a long drawn out fight turned out to be actually a pretty short, amicable sitting because we had to do what we had to do. And so that also involved our reductions to Department of Health and Workforce Services and clearly on the University of Wyoming. So instead of being cut by 16.5 million, the compromise is that both UW and the community colleges will get 8 million to their block grant funds. So that's one of their, and once again, we were able to do that because of the restrictions in the ARP program. In addition to that, we took, there was one school that was unfunded that had been on the list for 3 or 4 years. That happened to be in Fremont County. The language in here takes ARP dollars on the education side and says if funds are available through ARP, it pays for that program. So that's an $8.2 million project in Fremont County. We both had the carbon capture. The only thing we did there was we used LISRA, just a question of where the dollars were going to come from, and they had a little bit better language in their side. You may recall the $4 million that we used for the cryptocurrency matching program. That failed by 1 vote on the other side. They really wanted to have it, which was nice, but they also had about 2 pages of creating an advisory committee so that before the dollars are expended, they had to come in and do basically present a business model to this committee to demonstrate, in fact, that it's risk-free, essentially a loan, and that it's a wise thing to do, basically. So I thought that those sideboards are pretty good, and we all concurred with the Senate sideboards. Okay, let's talk a little bit about general fund dollars. We added basically 17 million in general funds on the House side. They reduced it by about 1.5 million. But the reason for that is we just took money from different pots for some of the projects that we did. And so when we ended up balancing out, the total amount recommended by the Joint Conference Committee is $16 million. So we're only 2 million short from where the House was to start with. Once again, though, really, we're just aligning the pots and where it comes from. So in addition to that, here's probably one of the key takeaways. With this budget bill, if you support our Joint Conference Committee report, how much do we save? Well, it's an overall reduction of $430 million. And when it originally came out, that reduction was 446 million. But by putting back in the community colleges and a few other things, and UW, that goes up to 430. But that's the number, ladies and gentlemen. So when you go back home and someone asks you, how much did we reduce our budget by? The answer is $430 million. So I don't think I'll go through the rest of them. I'll circulate this because it kind of goes, it breaks it down by the LSRA, the SIPA, and the Common Schools Capital Construction Account. But I think that'll all fan out when we go through this. But now we're going to walk through, as we did before, just kind of go one through that big sheet. So thank you.
Chairman Nicholas, would you move the Joint Conference Committee report and then provide the explanation? That was kind of the prelude, I think, or the foreword, or whatever. Yeah, go ahead.
I would move Joint Conference Committee report #1 and ask for your favorable consideration. And ladies and gentlemen, I'll do the first item. This is an identical amendment, and we adopted the Senate file and Senate reading #3 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And just a little more clarification to the body. So you have the number on the far left. And so you have what, #1, #2, #3, and then immediately to the right of that, there is the JCC action. And you'll see in bold on 1 and 2, you have a D and an A. So one of those positions was deleted. That would have been the Senate third reading #1. And then we adopted House second reading #26. So that's the delete and adopt. Now we're on to the item #3, which is a DFA, which is delete and further amend. Now that's contradictory to what my good friend from Fremont County that was on the conference committee wanted to do. He wanted to adopt and further amend all of these, but instead we deleted and further amended because that's the official procedure. So this is deleting and further amending Senate second reading amendment #21. And we'll start with the very first item, the office of the governor, $30,000. And so what we're doing here is we're agreeing to put $30,000 back into the chief executive's office. Moving on to the next item there, clean coal technology. We chose to select the position from our friends down the hall, and we'll still be funding it at $1.25 million, but it will be coming from SIPA S13. Moving on down to #13, and this is where one that will kind of look confusing. So the amendment from our friends down the hall was to delete entirely this $150,000 for the military department and the Veterans Museum. What we're doing here is we are not accepting that. So we are deleting the Senate's position and further amending that to say that the $150,000 is one time and that the agency must request that funding next year to see that funding go forward again. And then if you skip to just real quickly, you'll get down to agency 20 or agency #7 in state parks and cultural resources. That was an additional footnote discussing the Veterans Museum. So the Senate deleted all of that. The conference committee did not accept the Senate's position. And so that language goes back in. And so that's why it's stricken here, but that striking in the blue language means that it's actually still in the bill. So it's a little bit confusing. Just wanted to walk through that a little slower. Moving back up the page just slightly to the Department of Agriculture. This was an item that we did go ahead and accept the Senate's position and remove that $72,900 and the position. So we just discussed the Parks and Cultural Resources issue. Now to the community college. This is and the administration. And so what we have done here in the Joint Conference Committee is we accept adding back one position, but funding it with general funds versus school foundation funds. Moving down to the next item, this is state aid for the University of Wyoming as well as community colleges, and we delete all of the Senate's position there, and that will be addressed later in the presentation. But at this time, the $10 million in reduction to the university has been deleted, as well as the $10 million increase for community colleges. So again, one of those that kind of looks a little odd on the paper, but that's the action that's being taken. Moving down, the next one is the Department of Education, Agency 206. And the $70,000 there, if you'll notice, it was in parentheses, which meant the Senate position was to remove that 70,000. In the conference committee, we decided to keep that 70,000. That's why the parentheses of 70 has a line through it. So we will be keeping the 70,000, and that was money that goes towards the Talking Books program within the department. Moving on down to the section 300s and the budget balancer. And this is to remove $8,200,000 from the SIPA account that was then transferred to the school capital construction account. And this was for the auditorium in Fremont County. But then we add a footnote indicating that the project can be approved and that they need to go after ARPA funds to pay for that project. The reason it's different than the $10.7 million is because we do go ahead and fund the $2.5 million for level 1 and 2 designs for the Washakie K-12 school. That was part of that overall reduction that the Senate had made. And then the very last item on that page is the Casper State Office Building Advisory Task Force. And we remove that from the budget bill, as that will be taken care of in another piece of legislation this session. So again, that's item number 3. It was a DFA, delete and further amend. And I think I described each item within that box, and I would turn it over to our good colleague from the springs that flow from the rocks.
Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So item number 4 at the bottom of page 1 of this large sheet, the House had adopted second reading amendment number 1. And what that amendment had done was to give our treasurer's office an extra $2 million to help pay for the veterans tax exemption. You'll notice in the second column here, there's a D, which means deleted. So the effect of this, the big picture is the veterans will still get all of their benefits. The total cost of the program is about $6 million. The treasurer has 4, and the effect of deleting this $2 million means that the counties will have to make up the difference of about $2 million. So we're being a bit parsimonious with the counties. However, why are we doing that? Well, under the American Rescue Plan Act, the counties will get about $174 million from the federal government. So the idea is they can use $2 million of that to take care of the veterans. So that's item 4. Item 5 on the next page. Again, this is pretty simple. It's a deletion. The House had adopted the provision saying that if the death penalty is repealed, then we don't have to pay a lot of money for capital offense defenses and prosecution, et cetera. So, but because that the death penalty repeal bill failed, then this amendment goes away. And that's all I have to say about that.
Thank you, Representative Simpson. So members will go through this, and then you'll have an opportunity to ask questions about any of the sections. So when we do come to that point, we're asking questions, know the section number and your question, and you'll be able to line up 2 or 3 questions. And those people that address those things will be taking notes and respond to your questions. So Representative Simpson, I think we're on number 6.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. So we're on page 2, item 6. I need to give you a little background on this. In December, when the Appropriations Committee interviewed all the department heads in the state, we observed that there were 2 vacant positions in this particular department. And we were pretty aggressive in December, wanting to make sure that the cuts were appropriate in the right places. And so we proposed cutting 2 positions from this agency. What we learned later on is that those positions were critical and they were in the process of filling those positions. And then as we've arrived here in Cheyenne, and listened to your debate and your discussions about things that are happening in Washington, D.C., and sensing your desire to put up legal battles as much as possible to defend Wyoming against any possible regulations that could come down on the federal level. It was obvious to us that we needed to restore those two positions in the Attorney General's office. And so collectively, we all agreed to do that. And then we sent that to the other chamber, and they did not adopt that. Through the negotiations, they've agreed to accept our position and restore those two positions. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Schwartz. I think you've got a couple sections, 7 and 8.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So item number 7 is a deletion of Senate third reading amendment number 5. This is similar to an amendment that we defeated. It added a footnote to State Parks and Cultural Resources in stating that they could not spend general fund appropriations to provide grants or payments to any news source. In the Senate side, they did exempt Wyoming Public Media, but we deleted that particular amendment. Then on to number 8, which is a delete and further amend of House third reading amendment number 4. In this one, we decreased by 16,000 plus of general fund monies that was allocated to travel, and then increased a little over 90,000 general fund to restore one full-time position to the Cultural Resources Division. And then the change was we modified the footnote that had required that there would still be 50 authorized positions in that department. And that is that amendment.
Thank you, Representative Simpson, number 9.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item 9, page 2. Members, if you haven't observed the Joint Conference Committee debates for the budget, you need to do that next year. Spend some time and come down with us. It's really quite fascinating because there are so many moving parts. What we do is we put our arms around things. We listen to your votes and your discussion, and then we couple that with our experience and knowledge on the budgets. And we prioritize what is important to us, because recognizing any conference committee is there to resolve conflicts. You have over here on one side is one position, the other side is another position. And so we work towards the middle to try to bring those together. This is one of those that was compromised. Now, you remember in our discussions about trying to preserve the general fund, we identified an agency called Interstate Streams Division found within the state engineer's office that was funded by the general fund to the tune of $630,744. We chose to take the funding out, instead of taking it out of the general fund, to go across and take it out of the Water Development Account 1, and thereby saving money in the general fund. The body at the end of the hall did not like doing that. They felt quite strongly that that was not to be. So in this negotiating process, back and forth and working to middle grounds, we accepted a denial on that item, and we traded it for other things that we believe that were more important to you. And so we recommended that we've agreed with the Senate that we withdraw that particular item.
Thank you, Representative Schwartz. You have the next two sections, 10 and 11.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So number 10 is an adopt of Senate second reading amendment number 7. And what this does, it reinserts 2 footnotes for the geological survey. Footnote 1 allocated $80,000 for field work and analysis of search for certain minerals such as cobalt, titanium, vanadium, I could go on. These are rare earths. And so the footnote 1 was to look for these rare earths. And footnote 2 was $50,000 for aeronautic magnetometer and magnetic resonance imaging for the similar minerals. That section has a 9-to-1 match, 9 federal dollars for every 1 of state dollars. Moving on to number 10, which is a deletion of House second reading number 7. You can see it's a very similar amendment, except that the House amendment restored 1 full-time position, and that was not accepted. So those are those 2 amendments.
Thank you. Representative Larson Lloyd, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the House. If you'd turn with me to page 3, and let's look at this. This is largely reflecting around our second reading amendment 35, where we made an effort to restore some of the step 3 reductions in the Department of Health to those populations receiving services that we felt the state still had a responsibility to maintain. And in that first action across the top there, you'll see a line stricken through the 12,204, and underneath it, the new language of 12,004. And the reduction there is we removed chiropractic care out of that. We conceded to the Senate's position and removed chiropractic care. Those reductions that we put back in place, the step 3 reductions we put back in place, were those Medicaid reimbursed services for vision, dental. We put back the adjustments they was going to make to the IBA, the individual budget accounts. We removed the freeze on the wait list for the comprehensive waiver. And we also for the ECC committee to reevaluate people who change in the comprehensive waiver. And then we also replaced a step 2, the services for comprehensive waiver. That was your PT, your physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech therapy services that they had shifted from the waiver to a Medicaid formula. And so that's the largest part of that. That's what that $12 million is for. When you go down into the public health division, you'll see that there's a line scratched through that, 750,000. We removed the YVIP, which was the immunization program. And I'll remind you that what that was is the Department of Health, the public health, provided immunizations to all providers, not just Medicaid providers or public health, but for all providers to administer to people needing those. This will now be made available still through public health. An individual in your community that needs an immunization can still get this through public health and still through the providers. The providers will now have to buy the vaccines. In the Department of Aging, we talked about a general fund services, the Wyoming Home Services. You'll recall that it was total general fund. Our House position was we restored it both step 2 and step 3, and that's that $4.1 million that you see there with the line through it. If you would put your finger on that and then come down to item number 16, there's a $1.3 million figure there. That was the Senate's position. That was the step 3 reduction in the Wyoming Home Services. We adopted their position and conceded ours. Now, what's important to understand is in the step 3 reduction, so this $1.3 million was, that was a 2.7 reduction. But to keep it from biennializing, they put back in half of that. And so we restored this plus the part that the governor put back in there. And so that reduction is for all intents and purposes, is half of what the home services amount was. If you come down, if you'll go back up to item 12 where it says Department of Family Services, Assistance and Services. You'll recall that the recommendation there was to make a 6% cut to foster care, guardian services, group homes, and residential treatment center. And we, instead of reducing 6% in our conversations with our colleagues in the department, reduce that reduction to 3%. And if you're trying to track that in this amendment, you'd find all of these actions on page 4. And I think the other important part of this, Mr. Chairman, as you look off to the side and you see other fund source, you're seeing this S10, that's all LSRA money. And you'll recall in the discussion when we was bringing this amendment, we talked about the appropriate use of our rainy day account and thought that funding these for the remaining part of the biennium was a good use of the LSRA. So there are some of you in here who also track the white rod and try to figure out how we track all of this on there. When you get to the LSRA on that document and you get to page 3 and you see the LSRA, and you're going to see a reduction in there of 23 million. 13 million of that use of the LSRA is putting these step through reductions back into the Department of Health. The other 10 million is the carbon capture and underground storage project that we funded. If you will, and I digress, I apologize, Mr. Chairman, we have a lot of documents and sometimes it's hard to track. If you would go down with me then to items 13 and 14. This was a step 2 reduction that was eliminated by our colleagues, and we delete both 13 and 14. What they done to accomplish that, and that was a similar action to our step 3 actions on the comprehensive waiver, but to fund that reduction, they took 6.5 million out of the University of Wyoming and put it into the Department of Health for a year. And then on number 14, they inserted the language, just one word there that said not to be, that the department wouldn't have that into their next request on their standard budget. We, as the good chairman of appropriations mentioned, we put back in all the reductions to the university to because we're at risk of too excessive of cuts that would disqualify them for some of the ARP funding that they're going to be available or worthy to receive. If you'll go with me to item number 15, that was an amendment that I put in that we adopted in public health, which would have restored a step 3 reduction to the high risk infant care. We deleted that. And then and we talked about item 16, that's our Wyoming Home Services. You'd find that on page 3 of your other document. And so folks, as you chew on that bone for a while and you have some questions, we'll answer them as we come to the conclusion of this.
Thank you. Representative Kinner, 17, 18, 19, 20.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, on the bottom of page 3, item 17, we actually deleted Senate third reading amendment number 19. So if you will kindly flip the page over to page 4, the top of page 4. I could hear all the papers rattling. Thank you for joining me. And what we did, we had actually adopted House third reading number 25. And you can see that the different agencies affected there. The top 2 were really technical corrections. And then the second one was a technical correction for grammar also. And then what we did relating to major maintenance funding for state facilities, the university and community colleges, we added subsection E to have the state auditor transfer an amount from the SIPA account to the general fund that equals the total expenditures from the general fund under subsection A as of that effective date. And this also, by the way, aligns with the governor's request to fund all major maintenance from SIPA for the duration of the biennium. Now, if you will kindly look at number 19, which is House Second Reading Amendment number 10, we actually adopted that. And you'll remember this. This is where we actually made a transfer of who is going to look after and help care for the Wyoming Council for Women's Issues. And so what we did was basically effect a transfer from the Wyoming Business Council to the Department of Workforce Services, which quite honestly, we feel is a better home for them. And really what we did was those two footnotes basically say that if there's any funds left, then those funds will be transferred also to support the expenses associated with the Wyoming Council for Women's Issues. And so now kindly move to number 20, which is House Second Reading Amendment number 39. And the DFA, as stated earlier, means delete and further amend. And this relates to the discussion on the first page related to number 3, where there were some funds that the body down the hall was moving around between the university and the community colleges. And then also, as stated on just the prior page, relating to funds coming from the university. And so really at the end of the day, what we agreed to do was increase $8 million in general fund for state aid to community colleges, and then also increase $8 million in general fund for state aid to the university. And so that was what we agreed to do with all of those dollars that were moving around for community colleges and the university. So 8 million for both of them. And that was our compromise on that. And with that, I will turn it over to my fellow representative.
Representative Schwartz, I think you have 21 and 22.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So line 21 was a delete and further amend Senate second reading number 18. And what this originally did was it allocated $325,000 of general fund money to do appraisals and environmental analysis in 2 areas of the state. One was down in the Medicine Bow National Forest. The other was a particular parcel in Grand Teton National Park. And this was then amended to remove the reference to Grand Teton National Park upon the failure of House Bill 164. So that pretty much sums it up. The appropriation is now reduced to $250,000 general fund.
Representative, did you cover 21 as well, or 22 as well?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, my mistake. Number 22, oh, I forgot about this one. I'm sorry. One of the representatives who actually did this is House Second Reading number 12. And this allocated $500,000 of general fund money for noxious weed and invasive species work on state lands.
Thank you very much. Representative Walters, 23, 24.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number 23, House Amendment, third reading amendment number 9 was a delete and further amend. And so really what we did here in the Joint Conference Committee is we accepted the $4 million of SIPA for the staking nodes and cryptocurrency activities at the University over the Hill. But then we added some more language to the project. We added an advisory council, and then we added a section that discusses the plan that's created on how this will all function. Basically, a business plan has to be submitted to the advisory council, and then the advisory council will submit that to the chief executive for final approval. And all of those additional language items can be found on page 8 and 9 of the actual amendments packet that you have in front of you. So that's why it was a further amend, as we added that additional language. The dollar values and the rest of it did not change. And then moving on to item number 24, this was adopted by the Joint Conference Committee, and this is House third reading amendment number 26. And this is in regards to the $15.5 million in for the university to have the ability to issue revenue bonds to purchase the apartment complex over there. And remember, that is, in doing so, that will save the state and the university just under $500,000 a year. So the good friends down the hall thought it was great to save some money if we could. And again, we adopted House third reading number 26, which is item 24.
Thank you. Representative Stith, item
Yes.
25.
Mr. Speaker, item 25, which is at the top of the next page, relates to our department that handles our corrections. You may recall what this House had done was to reauthorize 6 additional full-time equivalent positions for field services dealing with probationers. We had authorized $373,000, and then in joint conference, essentially the positions remain authorized, but the money was cut in half. So what gets added is $186,000 instead.
Thank you very much. Representative Kinner, 26, 27.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Ladies and gentlemen, item 26 and 27, we actually deleted item 27, House reading, third reading, number 23. And then we deleted and further amended Senate third reading number 16. And ladies and gentlemen, this relates to the budget transfers. And if you look at 27, you could see that the dollars that we were looking at one particular point in time were around $20 million. You could see that the Senate's position was about $1 million after looking at it. And what we want to do at the end of the day is make sure that the budget reserve account has a balance of $113 million. And so if needed, and we won't know till we get right down to the end, but if needed, we've agreed to transfer up to $5 million from the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account from the LISRA to the budget reserve account. And that's to bring that balance to the statutory balance of $113 million. And if it's less than that, if it's more than that, then obviously we won't need that transfer. Thank you. I'll turn it over to the good representative.
Representative Larson,
Thank you,
28, 29,
Mr. Chairman.
30.
And with your permission, I'd like to go back to page 3, if I may.
Section would you like to review?
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to go back to a little more explanation on item number 12. There's a component of that I failed to inform the committee on that I'd like to
Please
do.
proceed.
So is an oversight. So folks, if you'll go back to page 3 on the Department of Health stuff, if you look down there about midway down the page on 43, when we got into the Department of Family Services, I indicated that we had reduced the 6% cuts to 3%. There's another component of our amendment, which was to put back $600,000 in the Juvenile Justice Board. And what I failed to tell you is that in our delete and further amend, we deleted that was a second step 2 amount that we removed. But I just wanted to bring that to your attention in case you had missed that and make you aware of that. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And then, Mr. Chairman, if we could, I'd like to get back on track here and turn to page 5. And item 28, we delete and further amend action that this body took on the penitentiary capital construction account, where we were going to move that amount into the school capital construction account. In our negotiations, we decided not to move that into the school capital construction account, but elected to take that amount and their body and put it into savings. They took half and put it in the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund corpus. We took half and put it in the Common School Permanent Land Fund corpus. In a similar action on 29 and 30, Mr. Chairman, we took the OPSTA account, which we talked about. That's the statutory 1% of the money generated off the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund. And we had held that in the JAC position through the interim was to see if we were going to need it in this budget session. And if not, we were going to divert half of that to the Permanent Mineral Land Trust corpus, and the other was going to go into the LSRA. We we come back to that position and we will divert half of that into the permanent land fund or the permanent mineral trust fund corpus and half into the common school permanent land fund. I think the discussion I know the discussion that we had in this side, Mr. Chairman, and the discussion also that we had with our colleagues down the hall was, do we put that into the reserve account and have liquidity and be able to use it, or do we protect it from being used and let it generate funds for the future? We are recommending that we put it in the corpus, let that money enlarge the corpus and generate revenue for the future. We thought with the art funds that are coming to us over this next year and we have available the next few years would accomplish a similar action for what we had planned on having available to us in the reserve account. And so really the conversation ended as what do we do with our state funds currently to do the best good for the state, and then how can we take these federal dollars that are coming to us and do the best good that we can? And we thought that this action was appropriate. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you. Representative Simpson, 31.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So we're on item 31 on page 5, folks. The chamber down the hall adopted an amendment which allocated $38,000 from the general fund for the cost to form a task force. This task force would be focused on educational programs. In our negotiations with them, we came to the conclusion that we should delete the Senate amendment, and so we did so. Item 32 is actually just an amendment to that previous amendment. And since it was deleted, the 32 is deleted also. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Walters, 33.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Item number 33, this was deleted. This was Senate third reading number 18, and this is in regards to CARES Act and leftover CARES Act funding. And what our good friends had done is they had put into the budget bill basically a series of proposals that all are a culmination of all the bills we have seen this session dealing with those extra or leftover CARES Act funds. And it was agreed that it was a better vehicle to use the individual bills than to put the ideas into the budget bill. So again, item 33 was deleted.
Representative Stith, 34, 35, 36.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. So at the top of page 6, the first 3 items there, 34, 35, 36. So you see over here and under other funds, you have 10 million, 10 million, 10 million, looks like 30 million. It's really just $10 million. The amendments here in our chamber were very similar to the amendments on the other side. So we delete 2 of these and we keep the middle one, which is number 35 there. So we adopt that. And the only difference here is that this $10 million comes out of Fund S10, the Legislative Stabilization Reserve account, and it goes to the governor's office. And then after it goes to the governor's office, the money makes its way to the Energy Authority. And it was agreed that that's the better path for the money to travel. So thank you.
Thank you. Representative Larson, Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Folks, winding up on page 6, there are 4 actions, 37, 38, 39, and 40. All are House amendments that we deleted. The first 2, you'll recall we talked about raising the tip to our reserve accounts to 225%. And you'll see those actions in 38 and 37, 38, and 39. That's going to be a subject of Cap Fin during this interim. This would have been for 1 year. General consensus is we felt that this would be better in a bill than one time in the budget. We adopted it, but we elected to delete it in our conference committee. The final object, or the final item, I shouldn't have said object, the final item number 40 was a direction in a House amendment for the department to compile a report for anticipated savings as a result of consolidation of human resources. What we heard in our conference committee is that is already in the process and may have that by the end of May. And so we felt that that was no longer necessary and deleted it. So Mr. Chairman, at your pleasure, I think I speak for the committee and say we would welcome any questions or comments on the Joint Conference Committee.
Thank you. So members, I think probably the most efficient way to do this is by page. So I'm going to invite any questions up from page one, and you certainly for the committee. So if any member has a question from page one of the Joint Conference Committee summary report, so the big sheet, anything from page one, which would be item 1, 2, 3, and 4. Any member have a question on items 1 through 4? 1 through 4. Seeing Representative Newsom, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can you describe to me what happened with the on the Wyoming Military Department and the state parks and how that plays out? So is the Wyoming Military Department still taking care of that museum and state parks isn't, or is state parks doing that and they're not? So if you could describe that to me, that would be great. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Walters.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To answer that question, state parks will still be involved in helping the military department in the operation of the museum, and the $150,000 will help that take place, just as those footnotes were in place previous to the Senate action, or excuse me, to our friends down the hall, Zach.
Any other questions from page 1 of the summary report? Page 1 of the summary report. Seeing none, page 2. This will be items 5 through 11. Page 2, items 5 through 11. Page 2, items 5 through 11. Seeing none. Page 3. Page 2.
Mr. Speaker.
Representative, are we asking a question? Representative, go ahead, please.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. If I could request not only a summary again of what happened with item number 12, but in conjunction with page 17 of the original budget, just so that we, when we go home, will have a good idea of where we were and where we are with the passage of this supplemental budget.
So Representative McGuire, I want to be clear, we're on page 3, item 12 and page 17 of the budget. Is that accurate? So this is under the healthcare financing, et cetera. Representative Larson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So in behavioral health, if you were on page 17 of what we called the summary sheet, and the changes in the director's office in our conference committee didn't change. Healthcare financing is where in the Joint Conference Committee on page 3, item 12 comes into effect, and you'll see a reduction. Instead of $12.2 million, there's a reduction of $12 million 4,000. And the difference from page 17 to the conference committee is, the difference between page 17 on here and the conference committee is we added 12 million back in the step 3 reductions. And so that's all of the waiver things, vision, the reduction that they done for adult vision and dental, the individual budget amounts for the DD waiver population, the freezing the wait list that was on there, the extraordinary care committee, and the services that was a step 2 reduction. So that is shown as a reduction in behavioral health in your cheat sheet. We amended it to come back in here. If you go over to the next page, well, and then we also had reductions. If you went down on page 17 of your summary sheet to the department or to public health, you would have seen a reduction, which we tried to amend and bring back some immunization and some extraordinary care for high-risk infant care. We deleted those amendments in our conference committee, so nothing changes on public health in your summary sheet. If you go to the Department of Aging or the Division of Aging, you see a reduction there in the governor's request of 4.8 million. We put back in the 1.374 to the Wyoming Home Services, and then that aligns up with his request to add in a similar amount in the second half of this biennium as well. And I believe, and I'm happy to sit down with anybody. I know that this is a lot, but I'm happy to sit down and individually with you and show you how that lines up as well. But so the step 3 reductions on the summary sheet come back in for all intents and purposes in healthcare financing, and some in behavioral health, and none in public health, and the Wyoming Home Services in the aging division.
Thank you, Representative Gray. You have a query on page 3 of the summary report?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a quick point of clarification. Are we going to get another round for comments, or is this also comments or questions?
Representative Gray, members, we're going to vote on the conference committee report when we're done taking questions on this.
Okay. So, okay. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I interpret this as comments too. So I just want to make a comment that, well, I'm probably going to vote for the conference committee report because I do want the reductions to occur. That I'm disappointed that there was a restoration of 8 million on the university. I think that the original step 3 reductions, we should have retained that original amount, which I think was very generous. And I just want to say I don't agree with that restoration. So thank you very much.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments on page 3 summary sheet? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And it's on item number 12 again, specifically under the Department of Family Services. And I just need to a little more explanation. It's here in a couple other places where we are asking the agencies to submit budget requests to fund the appropriations for the immediately succeeding fiscal biennium. And I don't understand if that means we're asking them over the next year to submit those. When are we submitting the requests, and at what fiscal biennium are we asking them to take money out of? The language just confuses me, and it can't mean the current biennium we're in, I don't believe, but I can't believe we're going to wait 2 years for the request from this biennium. So I just need some clarification on what that means in layman's terms.
Thank you. Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And so, as you recall, when we done our standard budget in 2020, the funding for all of that was general fund dollars. They came back and made reductions, step 3 reductions in these, which we didn't have the general funds to fund. We pulled that money to reinstate all of those programs out of the LSRA. And so the direction here is for them to make sure that that doesn't go forward out of the LSRA, that they will make that request in their next standard budget request as part of their general fund request, if that makes sense. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from page 3? Page 3 of the summary report. Questions or comments to Representative White? Questions? Page 4. page 4. Any other comments? This is items 18 through 24. Page 4. Page 4. Page 5. Chairman Wilson, page 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is regarding items 28 and 29. So it's water under the bridge, I guess, that we took the money from the two accounts and put them into permanent funds, which seems to kind of go against what we've been trying to do the last 4 or 5 years to enhance our liquidity. So maybe I wouldn't have given on that one, but it's there. So we're evidently going to use the ARPA dollars for liquidity instead. So looking up some of the specifics of the ARPA dollars, I see that those payments are to be made maybe 60 days after the state certifies that it intends to comply. So if I don't know when our chief executive would intend to certify compliance, but supposing it's April 1st, up to June 1st, we've got a first transfer date, May 1, and then further information on the ARPA that the Treasury can withhold up to 50% for up to 12 months after certification based on, I think, unemployment numbers. So I guess I would like to hear a little bit of the discussion about our liquidity situation with basically doing away with the OPSTA account. And, not that the pen cap account was very liquid, but instead of putting it into reserve. So the dates in there concern me a little bit with the ARPA money, and if we could just hear about that.
Representative Larson Lloyd to that question, please.
So, Mr. Chairman, we did have some discussion as this ARPA money came available, and we looked at the actions that we were doing across the board in the JCC recommendations. We kind of had to go back and on each one of them say, how will this impact our use of those funds that are going to be coming available? And in the ops account, particularly where we do that in a two-step, we've done that in a two-step process 1 year. We're actually going to do that on the 16th of April, and then we're going to a year from now. That will not impact our ability on those ARPA funds. So but to the good chairman of appropriations, sorry, Mr. Chairman, I got the giggles, but to the good chairman of appropriations, her question is valid, and that came up, I think, probably as a result of her time on the appropriations committee, but we did have those conversations to ensure that we were not jeopardizing our ability to use any additional funds.
Representative Hallinan for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I have a question on item number 25, and then I'd like to make a comment about 29 and 30 and 28. My question on 25 is that the amount of general fund that was approved, 186,775, and there's also 6 FTE positions related that are also approved. So that would only be about $30,000 for each one of those FTE that are approved. I wonder how you come up with that number. Thank you.
President Hallinan, if you want to go ahead and make your comments on the other one at the same time, then they'll answer them both or respond to both. Please.
Okay, on item 28, 29, and 30, the total amount of that is being put $158 million, $159 million, 300,000 is being put into the corpus of the permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and in the Common School Permanent Land Fund. And I think we're in a deficit right now And I think that we should maintain the liquidity of our income that we get from this OPSTA and from the from the penitentiary capital construction account. So with that in mind, I think that we should have held our House position and opposed the Senate position on this issue. The time to put money into these corpuses is when you have a surplus, not when you have a deficit. And for that reason, I would say that this is a misguided position to have adopted by this body. So I would be against this budget bill unless this could be addressed at a subsequent conference committee that would deal with it. So that's my position on that particular issue. And I'd await your position on item number 25, 28, 29, and 30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Stiff.
Mr. Speaker, with respect to item number 25, the good doctor is correct that $186,000 is not going to fully fund 6 full-time equivalent positions. It's a compromise where the department has the authority to fill these positions, but we're not, to be honest, not giving them all the money they would need to do so. So if they want to fill the positions, they'll have to figure out how to do it in the rest of their budget. And just a short comment on the contribution to the permanent funds. I think the American Rescue Plan really did change the tenor of the discussion, because you're correct that if you have a budget shortfall, then you want to keep things in reserve and stay more liquid. But if the state's getting an extra $1 billion to spend, that seems to augur in favor of putting funds into the permanent corpuses. So that's my take on it, but I'll let the good chairman speak to that as well.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, ladies and gentlemen, you may recall when we had initial discussions, we were beginning to present the budget, that we were in excess of $50 million over in our general fund and BRA accounts than even since January. That number is higher now. In fact, right now it's almost guaranteed, unless there's an economic crash in the next month and a half, that we're going to have an additional $90 million that will come in the form of the investment earnings. And in addition, at the current price of oil and gas, we'll have another $100 million. So we're likely to have another $180 million in hand in July, in addition to the dollars that we already have. And then in the next fiscal year, if we have more than 3.25% interest return on our returns, and it's looking like that will be the case. And if if oil and gas stay up at $60, we will have then another $180 million. And you combine that, and basically we'll have the opportunity to capture that next session. But if we don't, those funds will tip into LISRA, and our LISRA will be $1.5 billion again. All in the same boat that we're working on funding education and resolving that issue. So it gives us the opportunity to use those funds if we need them. But the fact is the situation continues to change, and it has been changing for the good in the last 3 or 4 months, and that's a good thing. So what would have happened with these dollars had we not tipped it, half of it, into the Common Schools Permanent Land Fund? Well, you may recall the position was half of it was going to go into the permanent fund, into the permanent mill trust fund, and half into LISRA. That's what our friends down the hall wanted to do. What we said is, wait a minute, if we're going to save this on a long-term or medium-term basis, we want half of it to go into the Common Schools Permanent Land Fund, because by transferring $85 million in the Common Schools account, that will bring the equivalent to $4.5 to $5 million a year, up to $10 million a year biennium to cover our fiscal deficit on our school side. So we use this opportunity to, because we've never split that half and half before when we're using the 1% severance tax excess. And so we use that basically to our advantage. It's our position to be able to capture more of that for the Common School Lands Permanent Funds. And we think it was a good move, and we're actually surprised they let us do it. So thank you.
Thank you. We're on page 5, Majority Floor Leader Summers.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And first of all, I want to thank all the members of appropriations for their hard work. But I want to echo the concerns of the good doctor from the Land of Camels. And I don't see why we would want to tip any more into the permanent accounts than absolutely necessary. And if that was an option not to do that, I'd rather back up the LIZA, which backups the Edge School Foundation right now. And then as it relates to 28, item number 28, I don't see how that's in between two positions. So I want to understand how, I don't think, unless I'm missing something, the Senate didn't mess with that pot of money. Maybe they did and I'm just not seeing it. But our position was for it to go to the school capital construction account. And now we're splitting it between two permanent accounts. And so I'm not understanding how that's between two positions. And I don't like the policy behind it either, but I certainly support my good friends on appropriation.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So ladies and gentlemen, it's a good question. And it's one that we took to the Legislative Service Office on what exactly was in between the two positions. And typically, when you have two different funds, as a resolution of the differences between the two parties, it's allowable, and it has been routinely in the past, that you can pick a third fund. And so in fact, I have a list over on my desk that I can show the good majority floor leader where we've done it in the past and in this body. So it's a good question, but it's one that we looked up and from the good folks downstairs, they said, we're all right with it.
Representative Burkhart, Chairman Burkhart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And again, I'm on number 28, and I understand the good chairman of appropriations explanation of why they can do it or that it is possible. I guess I just don't understand why you would take one fund that's already a savings account. I understand, this body said, let's put it to something different and then put it to permanent funds at this point. It's already a savings account. So I'd like some more information on the logic behind putting it into a savings account that is permanent rather than one that we can go after as we need to replace that penitentiary.
Thank you. No one's responding. Dr. Representative Hallinan, anything further on page 5?
I have another comment on the 28, 29, and 30. On 28 and on 29 and 30, I see that the money is being available, at least under 29, that is made available into the, on number 30, it says it's available, the OPSTA money is put into the reserve account for Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and Common School Permanent Land Fund. And those would be able to get the higher rate of interest that I think my colleague has said would apply to the money that's put into the Permanent Wyoming Mineral Trust Fund and the Common School Permanent Land Fund. So that would detract from that side of the argument, I believe, and the income would be equal in the reserve accounts to those other two permanent funds. And so that's one additional reason to vote against this item. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Further discussion on page 5. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just in response to the last good gentleman from Gillette, those funds do not have the same return as the permanent funds. They are invested in basically short-term and medium term, and we allow portions of them to be invested in a little bit more medium term. But by far, the best returns come from our permanent corpuses.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Appreciate all the work and the compromise. And the thing, as I look at this, I can see how it looks like our appropriations committee. It's like, you can't go down this thing and go one for one. You'd be here all year talking about one thing and getting one side. So you got to group 4, 6, 8 of these together. you'll notice every one of my little amendments, gone. Gone. So I sit there and watch that, and one of them I really gird about, but I think, and then I look at this deal, 158 million in the permanent funds. I don't think we're too broke. Once again, we're a very wealthy state. I think you look in the original budget bill and you look at the prices of commodities and those tips that will go in the LSRA, it's going to be more than just the investment returns. And that was put in the budget last year. You don't see it because it wasn't brought into the supplemental budget bill. We're a real wealthy state. I apologize again for the May Craig. Now, with that said, I think one really part that's really important is this severance tax issue. Much of our severance tax is derived from school minerals, school trust land minerals. How many dollars of severance tax have gone to schools over all this time? Zero. And I know maybe a few bucks in the 90s, they're moving, but not much. And so I think this is a fundamental thing to, we've had the 4x10 button, but we need to take the 4x10 in that common school account as well. I mean, you double the common school account, then we're generating another 150, 200 million a year in investment income. We've solved a lot of our problems. So by maybe selling some pure gold in Teton County, by maybe directing some of these revenue flows into the common school account, we'll start building that up for the future and really do it. So that's the key part. I think my takeaway is we've had an acknowledgement on both ends of the body that, hey, this severance tax, some of it comes, a third of it basically or more comes off school minerals. Maybe some of that ought to go to the schools, not just the royalties as well. So, even though this is missing all of my amendments, I'm going to still support it. And we're going to come back and we're not poor. And I like what's been done with the Department of Health. That was my number one concern coming down here because it didn't need to be done. And so we haven't done that. And so I appreciate the good work the representative from Lander, the vice chair, has done on that issue as well with his Senate colleagues. And so I'm going to support. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Representative Gray, page 5.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So, I am struggling a little bit with this. I mean, why is there not a middle ground of placing the funds in a semi-liquid account that can be invested in the medium term, but can also be clawed back, creating a sub account within LISRA, some of these sub accounts already exist. And I don't understand a lot of times. I mean, I feel like this is like a compromise. Sometimes compromise can be the worst of everything. And so we lose some of the reductions. Some of those reductions maybe should have been restored, but without pay-fors. So they restore reductions without pay-fors. And then you also get this $130 million transfer to permanent funds when you didn't really need to do that. You could have just put them in a medium-term liquid account, invested them, gotten some earnings off that, and that would have been proceeds to those accounts. So you would have gotten the best of both worlds. So it's just disappointing. You're never going to be able to claw that back. And I guess my question is, I mean, does anyone understand what the thinking is when the other body has appeared to take the position that I have, which is we're not going to have tax increases. That's great. We're not going to have this trigger, but then they take funds off the table to potentially speed up a trigger in the future when that seems to be the preferred approach. And I don't know. It's very cryptic to me and odd. So I guess that's the question. Thank you.
Thank you. Chairman Zwanitzer, you were at the mic.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. And I guess it just concerns me, especially from this county. My ultimate question is how many state employees are we cutting out of the budget after the conference committee? So that's a question I ultimately want answered. I think it's around 320. And so my concerns are twofold. The first is this looks like we are permanently locking up just shy of $160 million while we are still eliminating 300 plus state employee jobs. And I just want to make sure that's correct. I think it is, but that would be nice to be confirmed. But the second is this kind of long-standing statement that we've made as a legislature that we bifurcate our budget, right? We have kind of general government appropriations and we have education funding. And there's a lot of murmurs, shall I say, in Laramie County and among state employees that we continue to harm state agencies and we don't have equivalent cuts in education because they're constitutionally protected. And we've tried very hard, and I've tried very hard when I talk to my constituents that no, we don't hurt state employees and general government for the benefit of education. But the testimony I've heard now twice is this money is better spent by going to the Common School Land Fund to help out the deficit which would otherwise be there or still is there, which in my mind says, hey, we're making sure we're not eliminating teachers. And I guess my complaint or my question is we're getting dangerously close to where I don't think I can legitimately say we're not cutting state employees and leaving education whole. So any comments on that, I think I would be appreciative. I know we have House Bill 173 that still has some work on the other body. But this may be the point where I don't think I can say that they're separate. We are legitimately locking away savings, cutting state employees, and putting that money to have investment returns to help K-12 education so we don't lose teachers is how I read that. Maybe I'm reading too much into it, but I think it's a legitimate concern, and if we could address that a little bit.
Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you. 2 points. First of all, to the good representative from Casper. The good news is we can recover more than half of the OFSTA and the dollars that were for the permanent penitentiary fund next session before the end of the biennium. So if in fact we do have another fiscal cliff or some fiscal issue that arrives, those monies don't pour into the permanent funds till the end of the biennium. And obviously we meet next year and before that happens. And so if we need to do it, we can go in and grab those funds. But that's just simple the way it is. And so those funds, more than half of them are not at risk if we choose to do so. We believe that saving some money in those permanent funds is just a good idea, and particularly as compared to how our friends down the hall are. With regards to the state employees, I don't have the exact numbers, but I think there were only about 13 real bodies that we lost. And there were some other layoffs that were going to be filled up over time, but maybe it was 19. But it was, and I think the good representative from the southwest corner will go through those numbers, but under no means did we basically let go a whole bunch of state employees. We eliminate a lot of positions, but not a lot of human positions.
Representative Simpson, did you have a response to some of those questions?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Folks, would you grab your pencil and write down some notes? You're going to want these statistics. Our LSO staff has provided those to us this morning. I appreciate their efforts to help us out. So in the 2021 supplemental budget, it results in 303 full-time employees, positions being eliminated, and 21 part-time employees for a total of 324 positions, authorizations that have been eliminated. People always ask how many pink slips, and which is a difficult question, frankly, because when the governor first initiated the layoffs or the reductions at the beginning of last year, there were employees that knew they were potentially going to be laid off, and so they started leaving the employment and finding better jobs. And so when we talk about positions and ghost positions and all those kind of things, we don't know. We add all those up. But what we do know is that there were 26 layoffs last year, reduction in force, and that we can only speculate July when the phase 3 cuts come into play we're speculating that there will be an additional 19 layoffs. Now, bear in mind, that is only as a result of the general fund reductions. There are other agencies such as the Business Council, our university, our junior college, our community colleges and tourism. For example, the community colleges have testified that they have made 170 full-time equivalent reductions in their force. The university reported reductions of 45 faculty and 30 staff and 300 graduate students that were reduced as a result of these budget cuts. Hopefully it'll give you some statistics to think about. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And tailing on to the good representative from Star Valley, I just would remind you in the budget presentations, we noted that there would be in the Department of Family Services, as they looked at their general fund reductions, the proposal that they have in place is to close a dormitory each at the boys' school and at the girls' school. And that fit within the populations currently being served, but that would result in 14 positions being lost.
Thank you, Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I kind of want to echo member from House District 43's comments here, and it's not so much on the losing teacher side of things or the education side of things. I think that's a separate argument that we can have. What my concern is I think the good representative from Star Valley just said, you can't really have this discussion about pink slips. I don't think the pink slip side of things really comes out. But what does compute to me, what gets into my brain when I start hearing this is 300 jobs. And these 300 jobs are not necessarily just here in Cheyenne. I just heard from a sidebar conversation here that the majority, I think a little over half of those came out of the state penitentiary. You know, they're unfunded positions and they're not there. So that means the city around Rollins is losing a substantial amount of money that's being recirculated back into that community. And that's happening all over this state. And what I remember hearing, and I remember seeing it all over the newspapers, when one mine closed up in the northeastern part of this state, jobs lost. And this body, the body down the hall, and just about everybody across the state immediately went into this panic and fervor about what are we going to do about saving jobs? How are we going to save these jobs? But I'm not going to lie, I have a really hard time, just like my good colleague here from District 43 that has very similar issues that go back to your constituents and go, just cut out 300 jobs. That's a tough discussion to have when you're knocking on doors. It's a really, really tough discussion. And these are not only did I cut jobs, but I also cut services along with them. And these services mean a lot to these people. I remember having a discussion with somebody just over my district just last year. Man, I'll tell you, the discussion was hard. They had a 6-year-old daughter that was developmentally disabled. They were losing her DD waiver according to the cuts. You know, they were getting notices from the Department of Health letting them know that they needed to be looking for potential other sources. Like, these are real serious cuts. And so when I see 300 plus jobs, I think about that headline. I think about that headline in every single one of our communities. Jobs and money back into our community. But somehow or another, ladies and gentlemen, we found a way to shove another $150 million into our savings account. I'm a little frustrated. And I can only imagine what the people who are listening to this or will see this in the paper, what they will feel at the end of the day. We're cutting services. We're cutting jobs. We're taking money out of our economy that can be respent, and we're shoving money into savings. I'm going to ask for a no vote. Thank you.
Any other discussion on page 5? Page 5. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So interesting debates, ladies and gentlemen. We've got folks up at the mic saying that we should save more, and we have folks saying that we shouldn't save any. at this particular time. But I think you have to remember that the OFSTA, that 1% plus the 30 million, all comes from one-time savings that we put in the account for certain things. And so we treasure and we protect that accounts. If we decided we were going to take that 1% and put it into the regular costs of government so that we spent 1% every year or every biennium as part of our budget, that's when we'd be in trouble. The reason that we save that dollars, it's like the SIPA dollars. Those funds are saved for one-time projects to move this state forward, to do those capital construction projects that need to happen and keep our schools, top rate and not from falling apart, to keep our state buildings together, to help. Sometimes we use it to surface our roads. Sometimes we use it for other projects, but whenever we can, we take the 1% and use it to put it in the permanent mental trust fund, basically to make our children and our children's children protected from the permanent mental trust fund to hedge against inflation. That's what we use it for. And so when we grab it and use it for one-time things, that's why we grab it. We grab it for one-time situations. The fact is that had we used that, say, to help shore up education for 1 year, then it would be gone and we'd be in the same boat we were last year. If we used it to fund 100 state employees, then it would be gone and we'd be back in the same situation last year. When we put it in permanent funds, we reap the benefit of it for the next 150 years. So it's just a balance of where you do it and how you do it. But I think it's important to realize that it's been our practice. You always save 1/3 for, it goes into the permanent funds, 1/3 in a medium day savings, and then the other third of, these are your income returns for one-time expenses and projects. And that's just kind of been a general rule of thumb since I've been in the legislature for the past 25 years. And so we use that to kind of balance out, okay, what are we going to do with one-time dollars, which is the OFSTA dollars? The pen account. We did the pen account so to build that pen in 25 years, but we've learned now that it's going to last longer than that. And we don't have the prison crowding that we had before because of our actions, by the way. And does it make, if we wanted to save for every important building in the state, we'd have to have 350 savings accounts for all those buildings. So the concept was, well, why just that one particular account? We did it when there was an emergency, but that emergency, to the best of our knowledge, is gone. So, but what was it? It was one-time dollars. And so when we have one-time dollars, we can save it, or we can put it in a medium-term account, or we use it to the best benefit, where we get the biggest bang for our buck. And that's just been our practice. So, thank you.
Representative Larson Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think the discussion warrants a little further explanation as we have these discussions on the number of employees lost. It's interesting, as you said on this committee, as you start going into the budget session, you hear all of this from one point of view that says, we got to cover government, we hate their guts and liver, and we got to get rid of everybody, and it doesn't count unless they're a live body and there's blood strewn across the runway. Then we make the cuts, and you hear from this that how dare you cut any of these positions, you cut these positions and you're all going to hell. And so what you need to understand when we take these agency vacancy positions is the agencies over the years, we are now at a level around our state employment level of about 2003. And over the years, we have, particularly in two agencies, Department of Health and Department of Correction, they've allowed them to have extra positions. And having those extra positions vacant but funded allows them to do things within their budget if they needed to do raises, if they needed to bring people in other places. And even contrary to a shake like this, the answer is this. And so when we talk about some of these reductions, these are offered up by the agency saying, we're not in a position, and particularly as we heard from the agency that oversees corrections, that the positions that were vacant and positions that we found that were vacant for a period of time were okay. They're still able to provide the services and do that. So when we talk about reduction in in numbers across the board, we realize that there are some that impact the population and people, but you also have to realize that there are a number of these positions that were vacant and have been vacant for a period of time. We've actually whittled those numbers down over the years. When we first come on, our good floor leader, when we would work these budgets, we would find out these positions. We actually have one position over down on the far end of the state next to the town next to the state to the west of us in that state institution or state hospital that's been open for 3 years. We'd love to fill that position. And it will stay open until we get it because we're contracting those services out at a much higher rate than we are. So we don't just go in and make coleslaw out of state agents, out of state employees. And so all of these, as you consider this, and I know that particularly here in Cheyenne, there's always a feeling of being ganged upon when we have this discussion on the budget. I think any state capital in the US would probably feel the same way. I think that we do this thoughtfully, and I don't think that we go in and we have constantly asked, why does there have to be a body associated with the cut to make it valid? It doesn't. It's the savings on the dollars. And if the cuts, but yet we're seeing that. So I think you want to be just a little bit careful in saying that these 300 positions are reflective in these respective communities because they're not.
Thank you. So members, we're still on page 5. So I try to keep your comments or your questions to page 5. Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's a lot of things getting commingled here. I think we've got the reduction point and then the point on the distribution. And I just want to be clear because 2 speakers ago, we're talking about intergenerational equity on the distribution piece. And there is a very reasonable middle ground that I just don't understand why we can never get to in these conference committees, which is to divert the OPSTA to a sub-account within LISRA and to say in an amendment that we're going to invest it, to ask the state treasurer in the IFC to invest it in a medium-term investment because we've got $1 billion ahead of it. So we can still claw it back, but we're also investing it, reaching our full potential. But 4 years down the line, we have this idea to have some kind of trigger tax, which is still out there and I think is really troubling, that we can pull that back. And I just don't understand why we're never able to get to that, I think, perfectly reasonable position. Now, I'm probably gonna vote for this because I think the reductions are important. I mean, I think that the Department of Health restoration was good, but I think that should have had a pay for in there, but you've still got a lot of reductions here to right size government. But I never can understand why we can never get to that middle ground in terms of distributions. And you still have intergenerational equity. We just have the ability, if we get into a crisis, to be able to pull that back within 6 to 12 months. And you can still have reinvestments with a high return in that situation, but keep it medium term, give yourself a medium term liquidity instead of locking it forever. And it's just, anyway, I just want to make sure that the argument that's being responded to is precisely what the argument is. And I don't think it was 2 speakers ago. And I just don't understand why we can never get to that point, but I appreciate it, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Thank you. Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So first and foremost, I want to go back to this. It's not even a parable. It's a real life experience when we watched coal country see the demise that it's under and the attack that it's under. And I remember one of these coal companies experienced a bankruptcy. And when this bankruptcy happened, I remember like 2 weeks later after the first headline was jobs are lost. The second headline was this particular CEO pocketed millions of dollars in bonuses. And I mean, just that I remember just how incredibly irate so many people were, how many jobs that could have saved, how many people that could have saved. And we wouldn't have lost these jobs and everything like that. And I'll tell you, the only reason I'm talking about that is because that's exactly what I see here. And that's what my constituents see. Okay. I have to go back and explain why I'm going to vote yes or no on this particular budget and why I'm going to do this. And it's one of the hardest things in the world to have that discussion with somebody when they can draw a corollary between these two processes. We were mad at coal country, but we're not mad at state government. We're shoving money into savings instead of savings people's jobs, instead of putting money back into the economy, instead of keeping people employed. Now, the thing that's tough on this is not all 315 positions were filled, right? We hear that only a few of them were vacant. What the most interesting part of this entire conversation was, is we are now serving the state with the same amount of employees that we did in 2003. Ladies and gentlemen, I was not even out of high school yet. That's insane to me. And I, as a former executive branch employee, I can tell you what was piled on my desk during the first rounds of budget cuts starting in 2012. How many extra duties and responsibilities I accumulated. And then in 2016, when I came to this legislature and I was running for this job, we cut $300 million. The former chief executive ran and grabbed $360 million. That was unprecedented. And now we're doing another 400 million. Holy smokes. But somehow or another, we found a way to put another $150 million one time. Get it? I understand. We found a way to put $150 million into savings. I can't do it, ladies and gentlemen. Everything else, when we look at this particular, and I'm trying to, what line it is here, 28, is probably one of the most critical pieces of this budget. And we blasted through pages 1 through 4 with hardly any discussion. And we got here and we learned how much this impacts, not just me, but 300 potential employees, the town of Rollins, city of Rollins, and quite a few others. I misspoke a few minutes ago, and I'm going to eat some crow here. I don't know that I'll vote no on this quite yet, because one of the biggest things that I come to realize in this body is a good compromise is when everybody walks away from the table upset. Not everybody got everything they wanted. So I'm gonna wait for the rest of the conversation to happen here with page 6 and see what else is going on. But I'll tell you right now, this portion right here, it's a hard pill to swallow. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Majority's Floor Leader Summers, second time, page 5.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. And I just want to say I'm on in support of the conference committee report. I may have issues with how that bit of savings was handled, but all in all, I think the good appropriations committee did a good job.
All right, anybody at page 5, page 6? Any questions on page 6? Page 6. So I want to just make sure there's no questions anybody has on the bill anywhere in the joint conference committee report. Any final questions? Any final questions? Final questions on the entire conference committee report? All right, we are voting on conference committee report, conference committee number 1, report on House Bill 1. A majority of the elected members is required to adopt the report. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner.
No.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stibar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zwanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Fortner? No to aye? Is that correct? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 52 aye, 7 no, 1 excused.
Members, by your vote, you have adopted the Joint Conference Committee number 1 report to House Bill 1.
Mr. Speaker. Privilege?
Chairman Nicholas, privilege, please proceed.
Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the rigorous debate. Thank you for putting up with your House Appropriations Committee. I know we can be a bit annoying on occasion, but what I'd really like to do is thank my committee. They're just hardworking folks, and you just can't imagine the number of hours and time that they put in. So thank you very much. And also, Mr. Speaker, I really want to thank the Legislative Service Office and in particular our good friend Don Williams. He's just a remarkable human being, and we couldn't make it without him. So thanks a lot.
So we do thank our Appropriations Committee in particular, and also our fiscal staff, Mr. Richards and all that team for their hard work. So thank you very much. All right, members, we're going to pick up on third reading. Regular list. Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 56.
Senate File 56, sponsored by Travel, Wyoming Gaming Commission, modifications and corrections, an act relating to gaming, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Thank you. We do have amendments. Representative Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I respectfully withdraw amendment number 1.
Thank you, Representative. Amendment number 1 is withdrawn. We have a second amendment. Chairman Nicholas. Just stand at ease for just a moment. So we're on Senate File 56. We have a third reading amendment number 2, Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move third reading amendment number 2 to Senate File 56 Ladies and gentlemen, this just adds political entities to have raffles, just because the way that the thing was crafted, we inadvertently, I think, kind of left out. So, when we have a Republican or a House or a Democrat fundraiser, we want to make sure we're legal. So on in favor.
Any discussion on the amendment? Any discussion on the amendment? Discussion seeing none. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 2, Senate File 56, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 56, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner,
No.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson. Wilson, no. Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Western, no. Closing vote. The vote is closed. 46 aye, 14 no.
House Bill 56, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 56 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 120.
Senate File 120, sponsored by Appropriations. Investment of state non-permanent funds, an act relating to public funds being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
All right, members, there is no amendment, but I need to explain it. We're advised by our Legislative Service Office that based on Constitution, Article 16, Section 6A, Romanet 2B, because this is altering how funds and the amount, prescribing the different investment conditions, increasing and decreasing percentages, et cetera, requires a 2/3 vote of each body. So this, while it's a Senate file, it requires a 2/3 vote. So with that, Senate File 120 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner,
No.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Heiner, aye to no. Burt, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 48 aye, 12 no.
Senate File 120, having received the affirmative joint of 2/3 the members elected to the House, Senate File greater than 2/3, Senate File 120 has passed the House. Next Senate file for consideration is Senate File 2.
Senate File 2, sponsored by School Facilities. School Facilities Project Prioritization, an act relating to K-12 school facilities, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We do have an amendment. Representative Larson, Dan.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 2 and ask for your favorable consideration. During discussion on this bill and the amendment, the second reading amendment, we discussed that there was $6 million in there. And I had questioned that. And I think when it came from the other side of the building here, the engrossed copy, that wasn't included. And in the amendment, we did. And I would like to delete the funding and also delete the study. And the main reason is we're so far into this year already that it doesn't do a whole lot of good. And it was 3 million. Okay, that's kind of what I was wondering. I misspoke. But we can take care of this in the budget in the next January, and we'll have plenty of time to deal with this. So that's the amendment, and we'll see if there's any discussion. Thank you.
Thank you, Representative Walters, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd encourage an aye vote on this amendment. I think the rest of the bill really has a lot of good things going on in it, and we don't really need the funding at this point. So I would encourage an aye vote on this amendment.
Any other member for their first time? First time, second time? Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 1, Senate File 2. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 2, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner,
No.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker, Oakley. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Air? Closing vote. Changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 58 aye. Tune. It's too late.
Representative Fortner, are you changing your vote from no to aye? Let's just verify before your hand is up on the page.
Yes, I am.
So Fortner is aye to, or no to aye, correct?
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
The vote will be 59 aye, 1 no.
House Bill, Senate File 2, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 2 has passed the House. Next Senate file is 88.
Senate File 88, sponsored by Senator Cost.
Sorry, Chief.
Ownership of fossils and artifacts, an act relating to property and conveyances being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
We do have an amendment. Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I do move third reading amendment number 1 to Senate File 88 and ask for your favorable consideration. I'm going back at it, guys. I really struggle with the fact that I just see this as a massive blow against private property rights. One of the stricken items in the original committee of the whole amendment was page 2, lines 17 through 19, and it says artifacts means any material remains of past human life or human activities that are of archaeological interest. And where this really comes down to is I feel like we are at a point where if someone were to find any artifact of any type on their property and it were to go to a potential litigation, we would not have the ability to claim or to state that it is yours because it was found on your property. And I think that that's going directly against private property rights and something we need to hold very dear in this state. And it takes away from private property owners. So this would, if we were to take and if we were to turn around that original committee of the whole amendment, it would mean that fossils, non-fossilized animal remains, as well as artifacts found on your property would be by law yours. And you would have the ability to keep those or to benefit from those. And so I believe that it's definitely something that needs to go back in here. This is a great bill. This is a bill that gives freedom to landowners and property rights to owners, and we need to make sure and take care of that. So I would ask for your favorable consideration, and if we could have some discussion on this, that'd be great.
Any member for their first time? Any member for their first time? First time, Representative Chairman Zwanitzer, first time.
Thanks, Mr. Speaker. I guess just question, because maybe we haven't debated enough. What is the current state of the law now? Maybe I need someone who's a realtor to come up and explain. I mean, I understand when you sell property or buy property, right, you have your covenants and your agreements, and you can discuss some mineral rights, and that's all in the mix. So maybe just remind me why the bill came, what's the current state, and what are we trying to fix? Because apparently I haven't heard enough discussion to get my mind around it yet.
Thank you. Chairman Eklund, first time.
So the question I would ask is that I've looked through the bill and it seems a little confusing when we get into the part of fossilized and unfossilized. And I'm not sure the local landowner or property owner would know the difference. I've got a box of bones at home. So we've dabbled a little in amateur paleontology, and I'm not sure I can tell the difference. I've got what should be a fossil that doesn't look like it's all that old, according to a professional paleontologist. So I'm just curious how we're going to distinguish that as property owners. And the bill is unclear, and we've gone back and forth on those two issues, fossilized and non-fossilized. If I could have some clarification, I'd appreciate it.
Any other member? Representative Larson Lloyd, first time.
Mr. Chairman, I'm in favor of the amendment. I think we pulled the cultural or the artifacts out in response to a pretty sensitive area that I think warrants sensitivity, and one that your select committee on tribal relations worked on a couple of years ago, where we find human remains, be that indigenous or otherwise, could be some pioneer that is buried along the way. But when we find those remains, and more importantly, sometimes they're buried with artifacts, and how we handle them and what's the appropriate way to show respect for them. And we passed that bill a couple of years ago with the help of both the tribal historic preservation offices as well as the state historic preservation offices, really as we try and do this. And so then when we look at this bill and we say that we're trying to determine who ownership is, and you get to artifacts, I will tell you that in visiting with one of the federal agency personnel in my part of the world, if it's over 50 years old, then it has historic significance and can be considered an artifact. So if you find not just an arrowhead or some a grinding plate, but also a horseshoe that may be over 50 years old, can be considered an artifact. A number of man-made things. I think we talked about if you found remnants of a gun, or my wife found out in our yard there was a grapevine that we pulled up, and there was part of a spur that had grown into it that is kind of a treasure for us. That's an artifact. And so I think when we had this discussion the other day, my good colleague that serves with me on the Tribal Relations Committee turned around and says, we have an interim study, and I agree with her. And so I would suggest that we adopt the amendment and allow us the opportunity to flesh this out a little bit more and determine, maybe address some of the sensitive issues that come that are relevant here, and try and bring that back as we move forward. But that's just my thoughts.
Thank you. Representative Sherwood, first time on the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I am against the amendment and would pose the question, who should own our history? I think that putting this language back in makes it messy. If someone from out of state comes in and buys property and starts exploring and finds a seer stone, should they, as a private corporation, be able to take that artifact that is relevant to our Mormon history here in the state to a private collection in California? Should they be able to remove that? Should they approach the church and ask what the church would like to see done with that artifact? I think that putting artifact back in the bill closes the door to these conversations. And as a historian, I, for one, would rather see our history, our artifacts enjoyed and shared and open to interpretation and accessible to all of our Wyoming people. Thank you.
Thank you. Other member for the first time, Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To maybe give a little clarification to the last speaker. I think our history should be everybody's history. I certainly do, but I think property rights are property rights. I'll tell you a little story about my property. I live just west of the base, and one day I'm walking in my driveway, which is just a dirt driveway, and I looked down, there was something really blue in the driveway, real small, like my thumbnail. So I went, wow, that's a pretty rock. So I started digging it out, and it kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. When I pulled it out, it was a like cobalt blue, silver, faded away, salt or pepper shaker, like 18th century, 1800s. So I went inside, I told my wife, I said, wow. I said, look at this. Just imagine this officer from the base out there had his lady out. They were having lunch on horseback, and we put it up on the shelf. So should that be for everybody to see? Come to my house, I'll show it to you. But should I have to give it to a museum? I think not. 2 years later, we're digging a garden. As I'm digging in the dirt in my garden, something pink just kind of flopped out in the dirt. I went, wow, what's that? And I pulled it up, and it was like chip of an arrowhead, little pink arrowhead. And I thought, wow, so the Indians been here and the officers were up there. So I thought about this story about, well, the officer never made it back to the base or whatever it was. Should I have to turn that arrowhead back in? I think not. Third story, my grandparents had a ranch just north of town on the ridge. It's part of Cheyenne now. On that ridge were teepee circles. And I remember my grandmother taking me out there when I couldn't hardly walk. And we pick up arrowheads. I have no idea what happened to those arrowheads, but should those have been turned into a museum or should they have been kept? Private property rights. So I urge you to vote yes for this amendment.
Any other member first time? Representative Clifford, first
Those
time.
need to ina. Hello, my relatives. Again, Hinani Nina. I'm an Arapaho woman, a proud woman of one of the tribes here in the state of Wyoming. We passed a law, just like my colleague that I serve on tribal relations with. And I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Repatriation is items that are of cultural value to my people. One that may have been taken by war unjustly or by deceit. We passed a law that looked at funerary human remains, and then those funerary objects that go along with burying a loved one. And so that's important. But when we talk about artifacts, it's very loose. There's federal laws. And I think we just need to take a really good look at what this imposes. And with that law that we did that established the human remains, it established procedures with having the tribes at the table, working with the state people who take care of those who have passed on. The state that takes care of our archaeological remains. And so the most important protocol of this was just looking at that bill struck a balance with property rights, but also with cultural respect, the dignity that goes with artifacts. And it's not to say that certain artifacts are going to be of every concern that it's going to upset my people. Millions of buffaloes we hunted. They were our main staple. You're going to find thousands and thousands of arrowheads. I'm pretty confident I could speak for my people. We don't take offense when you find those, because the friends and family I visit with around the state are very proud of those arrowheads. And then that gives me an opportunity to acknowledge and share stories of my people. Not that there's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. It's a prideful thing. And it's a learning moment. And so I rise in opposition of this amendment and support the bill. And if you would just please let us do our due diligence to really look at this issue. I think it's really important that everybody is at the table and their voices are heard. Thank you.
Thank you. Any of the members for their first time? We're on first time. First time, Representative Provenza, first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I hear concerns that neither of our tribes were consulted in this bill, and obviously they have the longest and richest history here. So while we might be talking about salt and pepper shakers or old pistols that we have found on our property, I don't think many of us in this room can understand what it means to find some of these meaningful artifacts that are rich in history in a people that have been here for tens of thousands of years. And so it's not about a pepper shaker. It's not about a gun in the sand. This is also about making sure that we respect and come to the table with the people that are most impacted by this, who have the richest history to learn. So I ask you to vote down this amendment. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? We are on first time, third reading amendment number 1. Chairman Flitner.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I just want to provide a little bit of clarity to the body. And if I may I speak to the bill, Mr. Speaker, which might help provide a little clarity on the amendment.
Please proceed to the bill and the amendment.
The bill had to do with a dispute that arose from a family's mineral right on a ranch that was sold. And it had to do with a severed right and one family member claiming that fossil remains of a intact stegosaurus, I believe, should be considered part of that mineral right. So it went to court and it was determined that fossils and that the fossil itself rather could not be severed and could not be considered part of the mineral right since it was on the ground. And so the family members brought this bill to us as a concern just to try to prevent this from happening to anybody else and the great cost that was incurred with the legal battle. So the language was fossils as well as artifacts because they are on the ground, so to speak, and could not be considered therefore part of a mineral estate. And so that's what the language of the bill is about, fossils and artifacts. I personally feel that, and I had said this also to the good representative who just spoke, that I felt like their concerns were assuaged at the top of page 2 on line 2 when it cites Wyoming statute 74106. I felt like their concerns were protected with regard to the citation of that statute within the bill itself. So that if that just helps to provide a little clarity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Thank you. Any other members for their first time? We're on first time. Seeing none, first time to second time. Any member that has already spoken, second time before the sponsor. Representative Blackburn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So right here in my hands, I have Wyoming statute 74-106, 2 pages. In here, it talks about if you discover the bones on your land, all the things that you have to do. And then if the state archaeologist determines that it might be a Native American, the things that we have to do through this county coroner and through the sheriff. That's not what we're talking about. I do also believe that if we find the bones, we better leave them alone and get them to whoever they belong to and take care of them properly with respect. I believe that. We're talking about artifacts. We're talking about arrowheads, chips of pottery, guns, knives. I read a list to you yesterday of what an artifact is. Vote yes on the amendment.
Any other amendments for their, any other amendments? Thankfully, no. Any other testimony, any debate on second time, third reading amendment number 1? Any other members for second time before the sponsor to the sponsor, Representative Haroldson?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I will just, I'm not going to belabor this. We'll get going this evening, but I will say that it was brought forward and said this doesn't have to do with a rifle in the sand or something like that. You know, it does because it's artifacts. So it does have to do with that. It does apply. And so I would definitely say that going with the original intent of this bill, I think is important as we are going to protect landowners as we do this and protect private property rights, because it ultimately comes down to one of the greatest privileges and freedoms we have in this nation. So I would ask that you would vote aye on the bill or on the amendment. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Members, we are voting on third reading amendment number 1, Senate File 88. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment is adopted. Senate File 88, having been read 3 separate times. The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner,
Aye.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker. Brown, Hunt. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Roscoe, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 50 aye, 8 no, 2 excused.
Senate File 88, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, Senate File 88 has passed the House. Next order of business is concurrences. We are at that order of business, a consideration of joint of request to concur with Senate amendments to House bills. The first message for our consideration is message 314 to House Bill 52. Chairman Eklund.
Mr. Speaker, I'm having trouble finding that amendment. What this bill, I would move concurrence with message 314 to House Bill 52. This is a bill on the protein enhancement donations to the schools and the processing charges. The Senate did 2 technical changes. They don't change the bill at all, and I would move and I vote on concurrence.
Any discussion on the concurrence? Discussion on the concurrence? Representative Gray.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not finding it on the list of emails we've gotten on concurrences. Could we identify the time stamp?
It was sent out Friday. It was on Friday at 1:53. The 26th at 1:53 from Chief Harding. Any discussion on the message? Discussion, seeing none. We are voting on the motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 52. A majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
House Bill 52.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown, excused, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner,
No.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stibar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer, Mr. Speaker. Clifford, Harshman. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. The vote is closed. 55 aye, 1 no, 4 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 52. Next message for our consideration is message 317 on House Bill 122. Chairman Flitner.
Mr. Speaker, I move I move concurrence on message number 317. And I would hand over, and I would vote for your concurrence, and I would hand over the description to the good bringer of the bill.
Thank you, Representative Western.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So I'm asking you to concur with what the Senate did. If you look, it's nothing major, just kind of tighten up the language a little bit and conforming to statutes. So please vote aye. Thank you.
Any other member for their first time on the concurrence? First time, second time, seeing none. Members, we are voting on motion to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 122. The majority of the elected members is required. Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Andrew, Baker, Banks, Bear, Blackburn, Brown excused, Burkhart, Burt, Clausen, Clifford excused, Connolly, Crago, Duncan, Eklund, Air, Flitner, Fortner,
No.
Gray, Greer, Hallinan, Haroldson, Harshman excused, Heiner, Henderson, Hunt excused, Jennings, Kenner, Knapp, Larson Lloyd, Larson Dan, McGuire, Martinez, Nyman, Newsom, Nicholas, Oakley, Obermuller, O'Hearn, Olson, Ottman, Paxton, Provenza, Roscoe, Schwartz, Sherwood, Simpson, Summers, Stith, Stivar, Sweeney, Walters, Washit, Western, Wharf, Williams, Wilson, Winter, Yin, Zawanitzer. Mr. Speaker. Closing vote. Are there any changes? Closing vote. Okay. Flitner, aye to no. Bear, aye to no. Blackburn, aye to no. Henderson, aye to no. Further changes? Closing vote. Vote is closed. 36 aye, 20 no, 4 excused.
By your vote, you have voted to concur with Senate amendments to House Bill 122. Messages from the Senate.
Message 320. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the like committee number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 7. The Senate conferees are Senator Nethercott, Chairman, Senator Kolb, Senator Salazar. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 321. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the like committee number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 73. The Senate conferees are Senator Steinmetz, Chairman, Senator Baldwin, Senator Schuler. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message number 322. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the like committee number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 49. The Senate conferees are Senator Kinski, Chairman, Senator Beitman, Senator Guru. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 323. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the like committee number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 121. The Senate conferees are Senator Perkins, Chairman, Senator Guru, Senator Kinski. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 324. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 22, Wyoming Military Code. The House bill listed below passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 29, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 325. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 64, Uniform Fraudulent Transfer Act, extinguishing claims. Ayes 29, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 326. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 79, subdivisions. Ayes 29, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 327. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 85, unlawful dissemination of intimate images. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 29, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Message 328. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 101, elk feed ground closings requirements. The House bill listed above passed the third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 28, noes 1, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 329. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 104, Uniform Trust Code Amendments. Ayes 29, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 330. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 68, Wyoming Statutory Foundation Acts Amendments. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 28, excused 2. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 331. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 107, Retirement System Efficient Disbursement Method. Ayes 28, noes 1, excused 1. Message 332. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 112, Pioneer Trapper License. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 25, noes 4, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Message 333. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. House Bill 217, Community Health Center and Rural Health Clinic Grants. Ayes 29, excused 1. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk. Mr. Speaker, House Bill 133, Online Sports Wagering. The House bill listed above passed on third reading in an amended form as follows by the vote indicated. Ayes 24, noes 5, excused 1. The Senate respectfully asks the House to concur by adopting the listed amendments. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
Standing committee reports, please. Members, we're trying to get these things so they're in the pipeline, i.e. conference committees, et cetera. So they're in the pipeline, and then we're going to go to committee of the whole. So we will be going to committee of the whole. Please, standing committee reports.
Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2 appropriations, to whom was referred Senate File 118 engrossed, Federal Emergency COVID-19 Relief Funding, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Kenner, Larson Lloyd, Nicholas, Schwartz, Simpson, Stith, Walters. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 76 engrossed, broadband development program amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 112 engrossed, insurance discount for accident prevention training. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom was referred Senate File 142 engrossed, prohibition on private funds for conducting elections. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Clifford, Roscoe. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business, and Economic Development, to whom is referred Senate File 141, Business Entities, Representation, and Detainer Cases. Respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Gray, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Noes, Representative Greer. Representative Greer, Chairman.
Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, no. Chairman Ottman.
The committee of the whole will please come to order. Okay. The first bill for our consideration is Senate File
148. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 148, sponsored by Senator Rothfuss. Requirements relating to depositors amendments, an act relating to special purpose depository institutions. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 9, Minerals, Business and Economic Development, to whom is referred Senate File 148, requirements relating to depositors amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Bear, Burkhart, Duncan, Air, Greer, Heiner, Sherwood, Western. Noes, Representative Gray. Representative Greer, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Representative Greer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rise report to do so with the recommendation of Senate File 148 do pass. And for the explanation of the bill, we'll turn that over to the good representative from Sheridan County.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Okay, folks, I don't have any notes, anything up here with me because that's how simple this is. It just simply pulls the United States out of there, and that's all the bill does. So why is it here? This bill is about parity and about fairness for banks. Right now, state charter banks and federally chartered banks can do business across the state, across the country, and internationally. And a lot of banks do in Wyoming. And of course, nationally, they have clients on virtually every single continent. That's what this bill is about, is giving some of these digital banks that we set up the same ability to transact with clients, both nationally and internationally. So please vote aye. Thank you.
Chairman Greer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just, for the explainer of the bill, just curious why it was originally drafted with the safeguards that you had to be subject yourself to the jurisdiction of the United States, and what's changed since the original legislation was enacted.
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the question from the distinguished and auspicious Chairman of Minerals. Well, quite frankly, the reason of that is because first we wanted to make sure we gave them the legal structure and the framework in order to set some of these institutions up, which they have, and things appear to be going pretty well. And we want to make sure that we get government out of the way and allow them to conduct lawful business. These institutions have to follow the exact, what we call KYC AML, the know your customer and anti-money laundering procedures that any other bank would have to for any other, whether it be new clients, old clients, or transferring clients. They have to go through the exact same procedures, whether it be through FinCEN, I guess we can, through the federal agencies that help regulate some of this type of activity. So they are subject to the same laws and have to go through the same protocols. So.
Thank you,
Chairman
Madam.
Larson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I could hear you. You were perfect. So my question was, is what's changed? Because I thought when we put this language into the bill, that was to be, that was one of the safeguards. And so have we been relieved of all of those concerns that a foreign entity, having complying with those jurisdictions will be, is that okay?
Representative Western.
Thank you, Madam Chair. To the auspicious Vice Chair of Appropriations. So yes, we feel that both with the commission, that these institutions are interested in doing business internationally. And that's a huge part of their book of business, as a lot of these clients are international, especially once we get into, if you look at just banks in general, certainly our national banks, international ones, they have clients all over the world in hundreds of different countries. And certainly for their clients that come from Western countries, those countries have pretty rigorous regulations and measures in place to ensure that these customers are who they say they are, that these assets are legitimate, that they're not connected to any sort of criminal activity or any other kind of stuff. And for the potential customers that come from countries with perhaps less than strict regulations. That's why we have these laws on our books to ensure that these customers, again, as long as they're legit, they go through the protocol of KYC, AML regulations, that these institutions are entirely lawful to interact with them. And again, this is about parity. There's a lot of folks in the digital asset space that are international, whether it be Western Europe, Asia, those kind of places, who absolutely want to work with some of these banks. But right now the banks have to look at them and say, look, you're very legit. We absolutely want to work with you. We want more clients, but right now we have these regulations on the books that are holding us back. Regulations, again, that some of these other state chartered banks and national banks don't have to worry about because they get to transact with some of these customers on transnational bounds. So please vote aye.
Is there any other discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Greer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that bill number 148 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 148 has passed the committee of the whole. Do I hit this? Next bill? Next bill for our consideration is Senate File 117. Okay, the reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 117, sponsored by Senator Pappas, Speech and Hearing Specialist Licensing Amendments, an act relating to professions and occupations. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 117, Speech and Hearing Specialist Licensing Amendments, respectfully report same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Clifford, Connolly, Flitner, Hallinan, Ottman, Romero Martinez, Stivar, Worf, Wilson. Representative Wilson, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Representative Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 117 do pass. There are no amendments, and I will take the bill myself. And it's really almost a cleanup of a cleanup. I'm not sure if I can keep my explanation shorter than the bill, but I will try. It's about speech language pathologists and audiologists. And for short, I'm just going to call them speech therapists, and no disrespect meant to the audiologist. It's just kind of long. So back a billion years ago in the 70s, when we set up the speech pathology board, at that time, the schools asked to separately credential the speech therapists in the schools because they needed to fingerprint them. And at that time, the speech pathology board didn't fingerprint their folks. So then fast forward to last year, we passed in this body the Interstate Speech and Audiology Compact so that these professionals could work between states. And we also put in a new requirement for fingerprinting, which the speech board hadn't had before. So then when we did that, we canceled out the Professional Teaching Standards Board credentialing because we thought because it was no longer needed. It was a supervisory role they didn't want to have. And now the fingerprinting was available. Well, lo and behold, after the bill was passed, we discovered that there actually are a very few people who had been grandfathered in the 70s and were still working in the schools. And now they no longer they could no longer get licensed under the Speech Pathology Board because in the 70s, when they started working, you only needed a bachelor's degree and now you need a master's. And obviously these people are very close to retirement. We had certainly never meant to, license them out of a job, and they're doing good work where they are. So this bill is to re-grandfather the people that we accidentally ungrandfathered. You'll just see at the bottom of page 1, if you held a valid certificate on July 1, 2020, which is these very few couple of people, they're qualified. We're grandfathering them in. They can only practice in the school system where they were or with the DD folks where they were. And then this paragraph C on the bottom of page 2 just specifies that this will be a single state license. It doesn't fall under the compact. So that's all it is. Please vote aye.
Thank you. Is there any other discussion on the bill? Okay. All right, question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Wilson's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that bill number 117 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 117 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 83. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 83, sponsored by Senator Wassenberger. Gillette College Community College District, an act relating to community college districts. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4 education, to whom was referred Senate File 83 engrossed Gillette College Community College District, respectful report same back to the House with the recommendation to do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Andrew, Brown, Connolly, Harshman, Nyman, Newsom, Obermueller, Paxton, Summers. Representative Paxton, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Paxton.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 83 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the standing committee amendments and turn the explanation of the bill over to the good speaker.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So members, I'm pleased to bring you Senate File 83. And I think, Madam Chairman, if it's okay, we'll dispense with the standing committee amendment, which if you just look at the title of the bill, it's Gillette College Community College District. It's kind of like that pizza place that says pizza twice. I don't know that we need to say college twice. So the amendment literally strikes one of the colleges. So if there's no questions on the standing committee amendment, let's go with the simple one and say college once. So Madam Chairman, on the standing committee amendment, I'd ask for the question on that.
Okay, you've heard the motion on the standing committee amendment. Are you ready for the question? Question having been called, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. The standing committee amendment number 1 has been adopted. We are back on the bill.
Madam Chairman.
Mr. Speaker.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So members, and to be clear, there weren't 2 colleges going to be formed, so we only needed college in the bill one time. So I think probably the easiest in the brevity of time is just to walk through the bill. And the walking through the bill, this is comporting with statute 21-18-312, formation of a district. And what we're talking about is the formation of a community college district, which is a quote unquote special district, if you will, within the community college system. So the process laid out in statute requires a county commission to submit an application to the commission, to the Wyoming Community College Commission. And I'm reading directly from the bill. So that was done. You can see last fall. Commission subsequently caused a survey to be taken care of. That survey was by an organization which does a lot of work on behalf of the state of Wyoming and many Western states, and another national organization of higher education. And then, as you will see on page 2, line 9, on November the 20th, the Community College Commission approved the formation, the application for formation. Now the next, and reported their survey findings to the legislature. So the next part of the phase is this legislature takes this issue up. And that's what's before you today in Senate File 83. And so the bottom part of page 2 and on the top of, and into page 3 talks about an election. So current statute requires that any special district, and in this case, a community college district, goes before the voters. And the voters both establish the community college district and authorize the levying of a mill levy. Now in current statute, that's up to 4 mills in that initial levy. There are 7 community college districts in the state. All of them, the last one I might add was formed in 1968. And it actually happens to be the community college in this county. But there are the 7, they all assess the full 4 mills. Plus one of them there's an additional optional voter mill. And then they all also have a trustee optional mill. that is being levied. So that's what the voters, that's what the Campbell County application, the commissioners on behalf of citizens in the county asked to be done. So if the legislature approves this, then the voters have the final say, the voters of Campbell County, just like the other 7 community colleges did. Now, I think it's probably good to take a look at page 3, because as you might imagine, currently Campbell County does have a college campus. We call it Gillette College. And I would respectfully say it is a fully functioning community college campus, just like the other 7 real district campuses. We have a satellite campus, if you will, as a district that is overseen overseen by the Northern Wyoming Community College District. And so what we're asking, and what we're asking is to have our own district. So we need a plan how to make that segregation, how that occurs. And there's both fiscal impacts, certainly, to our community and to the community that currently has the Northern Wyoming Community College District. So laid out, and this was done by our colleagues down the hall, is page 3 and onto page 4. And it talks about how we'll go through this process, how we'll go through this transition from one community colleges with Gillette College as a satellite, if you will, to 2 community colleges, and how that'll take place. Now, I think practically speaking, this is a 3 to 5, 6 year process. So it's not like an overnight thing. It requires accreditation. It requires numerous things. So Gillette and our campus in Campbell County will still be served for the next several years by the current community college district. And we'll work through those transitions. And this lays that out. So Madam Chairman, I think probably the best thing would be for me to stop. Last thing I'd say is we'd like this to take effective immediately. And in current statute, there would be an election 60 days after the last approval. So this would basically put an election in August of this year if it were approved this bill were approved and signed by the governor, became law. So it couldn't be in this coming May. That's too close to the 60 days. It would have to be in August at the earliest. So with that, Madam Chairman, I'd stand for any questions. Thank you.
Representative Banks.
Madam Chairman, thank you. A couple questions, and I realize the bill is just granting permission to move forward, but I do have a couple questions. If the bill is passed and then the good voters of Campbell County approve the process, what that means for the other 7 community colleges. The community college in my county serves 5 different counties, but only one of those counties pays a mill levy. Will the Gillette College, I assume it will just be Campbell County, or what will that district look like? And then I'm worried about the size of the pie for community colleges. So I realize right now there is no fiscal note attributed to this and what that will mean, but in realistic terms, the size of the pie and the money that we're giving to those community colleges, there is only so much of that to go around. So it may not be this year, it may not be 5 or 10 years from now, but here eventually that pie will be divided into 8 sections rather than 7. And I know the community college in my district just laid off, pink slipped 15 employees because of the budget constraints we're faced this year. So those are 15 really good paying jobs in my community that all of those people will be leaving because there are not comparable jobs for them. They are professors, they are directors, and obviously there's a very limited market for that in my community, in Wyoming in general. In addition, we cut 4 programs, 3 other programs are on hiatus, and 25 programs have been combined to be more general. So I understand the arguments for. I'm really worried about what this does for the other 7 community colleges in our state and how we continue funding those. Thank you.
Representative Fortner.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would like to express my first concern is I have no problem with the voters in Campbell County getting to vote on this project. My biggest concern is it couldn't happen at a worse down period in the state for probably since the Great Depression as far as mineral revenue goes. I do think it's going to be a tremendous downturn as far as the rest of the junior colleges go. I believe that it's going to be a trickle down effect, and it's going to affect all of them. I also believe it's going to affect industry as a whole. I think coal will go way faster. I think it'll affect diversification in Campbell County. I think we're going to have 4 more mills. It'd be a lot cheaper for industry to go over into 28 miles into Crook County or 67 up to Johnson County. There's a whole lot of concerns for me. I just do not see the benefits of walking away from a partnership we had with Sheridan for 53 years, which virtually cost us nothing. It'd be almost like if somebody bought you a house or bought a house and said you could live there your whole life, but they wanted to choose the color of the house, who did the yard maintenance, what the insurance they put on the house, and that kind of stuff. And to me, it's a no-brainer. If somebody's going to pay all of that, and you just ride along, and you don't get a say if you get a sports program, because that's what this is all about, is really a sports program. None of this came to a head until Gillette was told they could not have a sports program during the COVID-19 downturn. That's when it all came to a head. You know, I think it's a little premature myself, but I mean, I have no qualm about everybody voting for it. I mean, it's the constitutional right to be able to vote. I mean, it's Campbell County's constitutional right to vote. I know it's going to be a battle at home to fight it back, to keep our citizens and our industry from having to pay more taxes, which is going to, if it does pass it, that every generation from here on out is going to pay that burden. So anyways, that's my say on it. Like I say, I'm not telling you can't vote for it or against it. That's up to you. I'm just telling you the repercussions from the way I see things in Campbell County, the cost it's going to cause the whole state in the end. Thank you very much for your time.
Representative Knapp.
Thank you, Madam Speaker, or Madam Chairman.
Okay,
Excuse me. As a member of this community and a direct representative of the district, I would encourage the body to do exactly what the vote does, which is get the vote back to Campbell County residents to determine their own future. One of the things that's pretty impressive, I know you all got a handout in your mailboxes, but as the speaker said, this is a full functioning campus. Sometimes you think of a branch campus as a couple buildings and students that are able to attend because it's in their area. This is a full functioning campus. Over $90 million has been put into buildings by local government and local residents in partnership with the state and the district. There's great pride in the community for this college. And we've heard of the layoffs that happened up in the northeast corner of the state and the jobs that were lost. Most of those jobs that were lost were highly educated and experienced members of the workforce, some through attrition, some through buyouts, and some through actual layoffs. And this community college continues to funnel that system of employees for those industries. So it is important to them. The second thing is the number of students that actually go to the college from our own high schools. 25% of the high school graduates from Campbell County attend that community college versus 10% to the university over the hill. So it's important, I think, that number one, those students are able to save money by continuing to go, and also that we funnel those students to the university. So in short, I think our job is easy here. The decision may be a little bit more difficult up in our area, but the decision here is to send this back to the voters of our county. Thank you.
Representative McGuire.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So it's always interesting to look at the history, and I would be speaking strongly in favor of this bill. So in 1931, in this room right here, which had really just been completed not very many years before, the paint on those murals was still just about wet. This body appropriated funds for a study because at that time, the state of Wyoming had the lowest number of college graduates of any of the states. And so they appropriated that money and they had a study. And interestingly enough, they came back and they said, well, one of the issues is the further away that a student is from a college, the less likely that person is to go to college. I probably could have told them that for free, but hey, they did the study, and so good enough, we got to study. So then after that, every year from 1932 until 1944, there was a bill proposed in this room right here for community colleges in the state of Wyoming. And every year it was slammed down. It was defeated handily. And it rings true to me because when I was growing up, I grew up right next to a gentleman by the name of Harold Josendahl. And in those days, people took care of their neighbors. And so my mom would send me over to take care of his walk and everything. And she always said, he's the father of Casper College. Well, that didn't mean too much to me. But as I grew up, I came to understand that Harold was in this body as a representative. And he was the one who brought the bill every year, year in and year out, for community colleges. And then when he moved down to the Senate, he brought that bill year after year for community colleges. And in 1945, you have to remember that it was in January of 1945, the Allies had invaded Europe. They were driving for the Rhine. Everybody thought the end of the war is in sight. And those who were ahead of the curve were saying, you know what, we're going to have thousands and thousands of GIs coming back, and they're going to want to complete their education and get on with life and get on with the world. So we need something to help out. We need a junior college system. So they brought the bill up again. It was House Bill number 10. And it was so controversial that they actually had a joint session. They had the Senate come in right in here, and they were sitting in the aisles, and they had a joint session of the House and the Senate. And as far as I know, it may have been the only joint session that we've ever had to consider that bill. And it went down 37-14. And there was a big controversy because a lot of the senators got up while they were calling the roll, and they went out the side doors, and the person who was taking care of the roll didn't know if they were standing up to vote no or if they were standing up to leave. So there were some hijinks, and there were some stealing of newspapers, and they brought another bill, and they got out during late at the night, and they rewrote that entire bill. And what that bill was for junior college type of education, but it had to be in the local high school. It couldn't be a separate building. It couldn't be a separate college. So they took that bill, they rewrote it, they got it reintroduced. Again, there were some collecting of newspapers so people couldn't see what was going on. It passed the House by 1 vote. It went down and it passed the Senate, and the governor signed it. And in 1945, we had the first junior college bill passed in the state of Wyoming. And in July of 1945, they had the special election in Natrona County. And my mom and dad voted in that special election. And there was a 98.9% approval rating for the 4 mills to pay for that junior college. There were 15 people that voted against it. And thank goodness they passed it, because it has meant the world to Casper, and it's meant the world to all of our small communities around the state. Our junior college system is so valuable. It has done such a good job for all those people. I hope that we will move this along, and I hope that Gillette can enjoy a good, prosperous community college, because they deserve it. They've put the money up, they've spent the money, and it is just good for the state. So I hope you'll vote yes. Thank you.
Any other discussion on the bill? Representative Duncan, are you up?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I just have a real concern on this bill in terms of the districts. And I know this doesn't necessarily address it primarily in this bill. However, there's a bleeding over of lines between my community college and Sheridan College. We are going to be losing students, which equates to revenue, which equates to enrollment. And our territory is being poached. So, we constantly have problems with the community colleges coming to us. Every year, they're disorganized. They're trying to come together for some funds. I truly believe that we need to come together. The community colleges need to get together, get straight on a governance strategy and plan together. And then we go together on this project forward. We have quite a few bankruptcies happening in the north, in the land of the mines. This is going to end up being a mill levy, and it's going to be on the backs of some of these taxpayers. They are not going to be able to afford this. We're constantly being bombarded by taxes and increases. And here we are, a perfect example of the no taxing, and all of a sudden it's okay because it's in your backyard. I caution you to hold the brakes. It's a great idea, but there's too many moving parts. Too many moving parts. So let's slow down. Let's get the colleges together. Let's get them in organized, and then let's move forward. But I really have a real concern about this, on and against the bill.
Representative Bear.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This particular school is in my district, and I want to rise in support of the bill. And I want to just tell you a little story about my experience with the school. First of all, my daughter is a graduate, my son-in-law as well, of this school. It's been very helpful for my family, but I spoke to the gentleman who worked from this body over 50 years ago to try to run this very thing through this body, unsuccessfully, by the way, and he tried it several times. And so what he did is he just worked with the other college that we're currently married with out of another town. And that has worked for over 50 years, but it hasn't worked perfectly. And one thing that would really be nice is that we could finally be rewarded for the work that's gone in locally into this school and have local control. To the previous speaker's comments about poaching students, I would push back on that. This school's been in place, as I said, for over 50 years. And so the students are there that are going to be there. We're not starting a new school. We're not taking students from other locations. One thing that I look forward to, if we can have this local control, is just being able to more rapidly adjust to meet the industry demands in our area. This is a community college, and I hope that it always focuses on the needs of the community. It has thus far, but it could do better with a little bit of local control. And with that, I'm on and for the bill.
Representative Hallinan for first.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. This is a question of what the people of Campbell County want to do. And I think they should be given the opportunity by the state to set up a college district. I don't know for sure whether they will approve doing this or not, nor does anybody else here know. But I think that they should be given that opportunity. And with that, I stand in favor of this bill. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Speaker Barlow.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I'll try to quickly respond to some of the questions that came, and I do appreciate them. So first of all, to the counties served, every community college district in the state is just one county. They have service areas that encompass other counties. Now, the interesting thing about that service area thing is if you're in one of those service area counties, you never got a choice on what county you got serviced by, what college district you got serviced by. So you can take some of these areas, and they're very large areas, as was pointed out, 5 counties. That's a huge geographic area. Does it make sense that all of those 5 counties are served by that one? Or is there something that was closer that they would be served by better now? Better now. So I think that all the questions, many of the questions you're talking about still need to be addressed, but they're addressed outside of this bill, outside of this issue. That question about service area is actually responsibility of the commission, of the Community College Commission. That is their responsibility. And so fair that you would question that, but that is not part and parcel of this bill. Every community college district is just by one county, and then the service districts are some archaic thing that was developed a long time ago. Quite honestly, nobody knows. I mean, at least I don't know when it was done because nobody's provided that, but it needs to be revisited. So I think it's a fair point. About the pie. Let's talk about the pie. There are no community colleges in the state right now that through tuition and through tuition fees and local support can actually fund their entire community college operations. They require state support. And in fact, statewide, 70% of approximately 70% of community college budgets across all 7 districts come from the state. 70% of the dollars. You know, the traditional model of community colleges is a third from tuition, i.e. students, a third from local support, i.e. get the local buy-in, support your community and your community college, and a third may come from the state. Well, we're way beyond that third. We're way beyond that third. That tuition, that is also not in the hands of the community colleges individually. That is also in the hands of the statewide commission. So there's a second thing that really, I mean, this body can certainly lay out some policy for that in statute, but right now we've given that, we've designated that authority over to that governing body. And the third part of that we've given over is we don't appropriate money directly to each district. We send money to that commission, and that commission divvies that money out. And they divvy it inversely proportional to their taxing ability, their ability to raise mill levies locally. Ladies and gentlemen, the question was, will a district in Campbell County, if formed, how will it cut into the pie? And I'm going to respectfully say it's not going to. 4 mills in Campbell County and the revenue, the county commissioners are going to meet this coming week to deal with the revenue. 4 mills in Campbell County is right in the neighborhood of $14 million. $14 million is 4 mills annually. We estimate the college is going to cost $18 million annually just to operate. There is no way I can go to my community, to the good representative from the south, east central part of the state. I can't go to in good conscience, go to my community and say, yep, we're going to pay 100%. We're going to tax you at 100%, all 4 mills, and basically give everybody else free tuition. Because that's kind of where we'd get to, folks. We're not going to assess the 4 mills. We're going to assess what we need to try to get that 1/3, 1/3, 1/3. And guess what? We're not even going to ask for the 1/3 from the state, because if we don't, in current statute, if a community college district does not assess a full 4 mills, they're not eligible for state funds, period. So we're not cutting into the pie. We're not cutting into the fiscal pie, the state support pie. And to the good point that was made by the representative from the center of the state, the students are already going where they want to go. They're going because of the programs. They're going because of the proximity to, things they like to do, or jobs or whatever. So the students are already making choices. They're making choices because they can. And we would hope they do, encourage them to. So Madam Chairman, let me just see if I get if there's a few more things here. I will say this, ladies and gentlemen, it's unclear to me that I can rate that Campbell County will pass this at 98.9%. But we might get close. But I think what that illustrates is how important it is. Think about 1945. Think about the challenges that were in this nation, et cetera. Campbell County is dealing with those challenges right now. I just went to an event here last week with the advisory board for our community college. There were 3 students they were honoring. One of them was my age, I'll say it that way, my age, coal miner, 16 years, lost his job. And he went to the training program. He said, what can I do? What can the community college offer me? They said, well, what have you done in your job? He said, well, I was in EMS a long time ago. He's in his, just about to complete his nursing degree. 7 children. Gentleman my age, 7 children. He's going to get a new occupation because it was available right in the community where he was raising his children and had just lost his job. That's what a community college brings. In good times, there's opportunities. And when times get tougher, the opportunities are worth even more. So I'd ask for your favorable consideration on Senate File 83. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Are you ready for the question? Okay. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Paxton's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with a recommendation that Senate File number 83 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, no. Senate File 83 has passed the Committee of the Whole. I didn't know if he was going to. The next bill for consideration is Senate File 89.
Senate File 89, sponsored by Senator Cost, Public Utility Safety Lights, an act relating to motor vehicles. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 8, Transportation, Highways, and Military Affairs, to whom was referred Senate File 89 engrossed, Public Utility Safety Lights, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Baker, Brown, Burkhart, Burt, Henderson, McGuire, Obermueller, O'Hearn, Stivar. Representative Burkhart, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Burkhart?
Chairman Burkhart is not.
Chairman Burkhart? Oh, I'm sorry. Vice Chairman McGuire.
My apologies, Madam Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report it, do so with recommendation that Senate File number 89 do pass, and I further move and I don't believe that is there an amendment? And I turn it over to the good representative from our capital city. Thank you.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Folks, I have the honor to bring Senate File 89 and ask for your favorable consideration. This is a safety related bill, and I signed on to this because of that. And if you would look at the bottom of page 1 there, basically what this does is it provides for enabling legislation, the use of the word may, that the folks who operate our safety related vehicles, right? The plows, the trucks and so forth, they have an additional option here, and they may put some red lights on there. And we're looking at the engrossed version here. And the only change from the original edition to the engrossed version, just to get that out of the way here, is on line 13, page 2, after feet, it says feet of, and they had in front, feet in front of. And the thinking of this is that we want this to be visible 500 feet, as you see there, around. And this is vehicles that are operating at 20 miles an hour or within 3 feet of the roadway. And so we're going to add a new paragraph to 928, subparagraph H there. And the key words are, as I say, a public utility vehicle may display 1 or more flashing red lights visible from 500 feet of the vehicle when providing emergency services. Now, we've done a lot of work in this over the years, so that's it pretty much. Really want to try to enhance the safety options for the folks out on the road. If there's no questions, I'd call for the question. Oh.
Representative Washit.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Just a quick question. Is there any study or evidence that red lights are more visible than yellow lights? You know, we already allow these vehicles to be marked with flashing amber lights. I don't know how they suddenly become more visible because they have red lights, but I do see some possible concerns with, you know, people mistaking them for emergency vehicles when they're not. So just a point of concern.
Representative Henderson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. The answer is, I don't know, but I know that when I see a red light, I have a visceral instinct to get out of the way and pull over the side of the road. I have a visceral instinct to increase my alertness and awareness of what's going on. And to that extent, I think it makes sense. Hope that answers your question. No other questions? I call for the question.
Question being called. All those in favor of Vice Chairman McGuire's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 89 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Okay. Senate File 80. Oh. Okay, Senate File 89 has passed. The Committee of the Whole, Majority Floor Leader.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. So the next bill for our consideration will be Senate File 102. And we're still kind of waiting for the budget bill to come back for the signature on that. So the next bill after that would be Senate File 19 if time allows. So 102 and then Senate File 19.
Okay, the next bill for our consideration is Senate File 102. The reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 102, sponsored by Senator Driscoll. Unclaimed cooperative utility deposits and payments. An act relating to cooperative utilities. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, corporations, elections, and political subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 102 engrossed, unclaimed cooperative utility deposits and payments. Respectful report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Blackburn, Clausen, Clifford, Duncan, Air, Hunt, McGuire, Roscoe, Zwanitzer. Representative Zwanitzer, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwanitzer?
Hey, Madam Chairman, I move in the committee of the whole rise to report it, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 102 do pass. There are no standing committee amendments, and I would turn it over to the good Vice Chairman of Corporations to present the bill.
Vice Chairman Air.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Folks, I bring you House Bill Senate File 102 and ask for your favorable consideration. A few years ago, we amended the provision that any unclaimed capital credits that were owed by the cooperatives could be retained by the cooperative rather than being remitted to the state as unclaimed property. These retained capital credits are then used by the cooperative for community benefits, such as providing scholarships, purchasing market animals at the county fair, or sometimes they fund a foundation for charitable services. This bill seeks to do the same for unclaimed deposits. Unclaimed deposits that this bill is addressing, although they include the security deposits that are used to guarantee the payment of utility bills. Notice that this bill applies to deposits and advance payments. It is these advance payments that is the real reason for the bill. Occasionally, cooperatives will require a large advance payment to provide security for facilities dedicated to serve one large customer. If a large customer leaves or declares bankruptcy before the length of time required to amortize the investment, this advance payment is then used to cover that stranded investment. This bill would prevent the cooperative from having to pay a large unclaimed deposit to an out-of-state entity that would be able to retain those benefits those funds for the benefit of the local community. So what this bill does is just go into the Wyoming Cooperative Utilities Act and provides for the cooperatives to retain those capital credits for the community benefit, as I said. And then on page 2, line 17, it's the Unclaimed Property Act, and it's just a conforming amendment to allow the cooperative to keep those capital credits. With that, I stand for questions.
Representative Stiff.
Mr. Chairman, Madam Chairman, I apologize. Madam Chairman, I apologize. I just have a question. I don't quite understand why someone's deposit that they've made wouldn't be, if it's unclaimed, why it would not be turned over to the state treasurer's unclaimed property division. What's special about cooperative utilities that lets them just keep the money?
Well, I believe that it would just be better to retain that benefit in the local community.
Vice Chairman Air.
Oh, excuse me. It's no different than a capital credit that we've already allowed the cooperatives to retain. And I think it would be better to left in the local community to do the good things that I outlined that they can be used for.
Representative Duncan.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. As we heard in committee, some of the testimony directly relates to that, is that there was sometimes upwards of $4,000 to $20,000 in deposits that ended up going to the last known address to like Texas is where this company or this group had to go. And it ended up going to Texas unclaimed property. So it sat in the coffers in their unclaimed property and went unclaimed. So it was decided to, instead of doing that, that it would go back to the deposit holders here in Wyoming. And some of it could go to the, if it's local members, then it could go back to them. Otherwise, it could go into scholarships. And so as far as I remember, it was also allowed that it would be signed off on a contractual at the time that they make the deposit.
Representative Stiff.
Madam Chairwoman, so if I understand it right, the argument in favor of this bill is not that the electric cooperative utility has earned this money at all. It hasn't done anything to earn it. This is genuinely somebody else's money that was held in trust by the electric cooperative as a deposit. It's determined that they're entitled to a refund. It's really not the cooperative's money at all, but the cooperative, instead of turning it over to the unclaimed property division, just wants to keep it, right? I mean, how does that make sense? I just don't get it.
I think
Vice Chairman Air.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think it makes pretty good sense to retain it within the state and within the local community rather than sometimes these large amounts can be sent out of state to a bankrupt or a successor organization from an entity that declared bankruptcy. Seems better to keep it in our state than it would be to send it to some out of state entity that's a successor organization to the bankrupt entity.
Any further discussion on the bill? Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And just a comment, I guess maybe a question, why we hung with the 2 years. And the reason I asked that question is when you start dealing with the states, family members pass away. Oftentimes family members won't even know within 2 years. I mean, they may not be able to discover within 2 years that there was actually some unclaimed property, say it's a deposit, say it's a large deposit, for instance, hooking up electrical service at your home, business, et cetera. And so I'm a little nervous about the time frame and how quickly 2 years flies by. And so I'm a little bit nervous about that in the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Vice Chairman.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I want to refer to page 2, line 13, where it gives the cooperative the opportunity, if they so choose, to refund that if it was the case of a family member's deposit. And certainly every cooperative that I know of, if it was a local family or someone whose grandmother died and left a deposit, they would certainly refund that in that case. And this bill allows that to happen.
Any further discussion? Okay. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwanitzer's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate Bill 102 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Yes, division. Okay, all those in favor, please stand. Those on the floor are counted. Senate File 102 has passed the committee of the whole. Ayes 32. The next bill for consideration is Senate File 19. The clerk will please, reading clerk will please read the bill.
Senate File 19, sponsored by Judiciary, Public Health Emergencies, Immunity Amendments, an act relating to public health and safety. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom was referred Senate File 19 engrossed, Public Health Emergencies, Immunity Amendments. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Crago, Oakley, Olson, Rodriguez Williams, Washit, Zwanitzer. Noes, Representatives Larson, Dan, Provenza, Yin. Representative Olson, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure? Chairman Olson?
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises, report that it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 19 do pass. And I further move the adoption of the standing committee amendment. I'll explain the bill, and when the point is right, I'll mention the standing committee amendment, which is actually pretty minor. So the background here for everyone, COVID-19 protections are a concern for the entire country. If you remember, during the height of the pandemic, the chief executive of the country was working hard to try to negotiate federal protections as part of the initial CARES Act funding bill. Unfortunately, we know that that wasn't successful. And so where that fell is upon the states. Us being a state, here we are trying to solve the immunity issue. 33 states have passed immunity protections for business. And so here we are, enter Wyoming. Now, fast forward to our involvement that begins in the special session. As you'll recall, back in May, we added COVID as a covered injury under our workers' comp system that expired in the end of 2020. And then we took existing statute, which offered immunity for healthcare providers and expanded the good faith standard of the business community. So the bill you have in front of you, we're dealing with existing statute that, and then we're expanding it to COVID. So if you go to page 6 of the bill, 35-4-114, that's existing statute, immunity from liability. That's all existing law. And what we've really done here is on page 7, you'll see subsection D and subsection E are what we're adding to the law. So we've carved out a special immunity Or if you really want to, I like to take off my lawyer hat when it gets into immunity, and maybe now's a good time to do that. Immunity is such a troubling word because it's really not immunity. It's a limitation on liability, because what it does not do is it does not apply to willful or wanton misconduct. You can still bring a suit for that anytime. That's open. Those gates are wide open. So it's not a blanket immunity. It's really a limitation on liability. And we're talking specifically about COVID-19 and acts and emissions that arise out of COVID-19. The other two dials on the gates are going to be that we're going to require, you'll see subsection E, that a lawsuit describe with particularity the case, and then shall be proven by clear and convincing evidence. So the burden of proof is elevated. Traditionally, the burden of proof, all but 2 areas in Wyoming law, is preponderance of evidence, which is slightly lower than clear and convincing. So we've turned that dial up just a little bit. The dial's up a little bit from notice pleading to particularity. And the whole idea is to limit the floodgates of liability, not completely close the floodgate, just limit the floodgates for potential liability against Wyoming businesses for what some may deem as frivolous lawsuits against those businesses. And so that's the bill. And the last little part of it is section 3, which is the applicability of the law. It's only going to apply to actions and omissions that cause injury occurring on and after the effective date of this act. So nothing retroactive back to the health orders. From the moment this goes to effect, those are the acts and omissions that we're limiting liability or providing immunity for. Now, the standing committee amendment. So the standing committee amendment takes place on pages 4 and 5 of the bill. Page 4, subsection B, middle of the page, says that in any action involving a COVID-19 liability claim against a person or entity, there shall be a rebuttable presumption that the claimant accepted and assumed risk. And then it goes on to require this signage be out in front of every business. And so we saw that completely unnecessary. The standing committee amendment deletes all the signage. And instead, we add a little bit of language here to subsection B. So it reads, there shall be a rebuttable presumption that the claimant accepted and assumed the risk of catching COVID-19 if the claimant entered the premises of another. So ultimately, all we're doing is saying you don't assume the risk simply because there's a sign that puts you on notice. You assume the risk because there's a global pandemic, and when you step out into the world, you're on notice of what's going on, and you pretty much know that. And so I think that was pretty friendly. It wasn't a lot of heartburn from the business community about the signs. That's the standing committee amendment. Probably a good time to take any questions on the standing committee amendment. Otherwise, ask for the question on that.
Question having been called, all those in favor of the standing committee amendment number 1, please say aye. Those opposed, no. The amendment has passed. Okay. Back on the bill. Okay, Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And, that's the bill. So this bill, we heard an extreme amount of testimony from businesses all over Wyoming. One of the benefits of Zoom, highly sought after by our business community. As you know, and I think as many of you probably have seen as you follow the any COVID-19 restriction that may have an impact on a business. Just imagine what a COVID-19 lawsuit might do to a mom and pop shop. And that's the whole idea of this bill, is to provide a little bit of a limitation on liability so that we don't have more businesses closing up shop. And with that, I'd take any questions or the question on the bill.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I would like to respectfully move Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 to Senate File 19 and ask for your favorable consideration. So members, when we heard this in judiciary, a lot of the things that we contemplated is what it does to business. Something that we did in the special session that expired, as mentioned by the good chairman, was the presumption that COVID-19 counts as an injury towards our workers' comp. We did that in the special session to count COVID-19 as an injury to make sure that our businesses could still keep operating. And while COVID-19 was a pandemic, we wanted to also protect the workers at the same time. And so I bring forth this amendment to extend the presumption into March 2020 of next year. And this might be something that we will also continue editing in the special session if we have one. But I think it just makes sense to keep protecting workers in the long run. And I think this also benefits businesses because it puts the liability off of businesses and has their claims handled by workers' comp instead of them suing their employer. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Chairman Wilson.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I think I like the amendment, and it's kind of embarrassing to admit as chairman of labor, but I don't know the unemployment as well as I ought to and as well as I hope to during the interim. But there are a lot of employees across the state who are not actually covered by our workers' comp system. So do I understand correctly that those people were not covered in our special session legislation, and are they also not covered by this amendment?
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. And to the good chairman of Labor and Health, that's correct. So this only covers people who are in workers' comp. I did have some thought of maybe covering all workers with our workers' comp, and maybe I will bring that as a second reading amendment. But I think for right now, for first reading committee of the whole, I think it just makes sense to cover the workers that do fall under workers' comp. Thank you.
Chairman Swanitzer.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. I guess some discussion on what the federal, workers' comp is a joint program with the feds. And I just want to make sure we're still going to be in compliance with extending this, and it doesn't, if there's any kind of change at the federal level over the next year, what we may be opening ourselves up to. So if someone could, and I'm not as good as workers' comp law either, so if somebody could mention how it might interface with the federal government's extension or non-extension. They likely are to extend it, but I don't want to put our cart before their horse.
Representative Yin.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So I will say I did email the Department of Workforce Services to understand what the numbers were for our existing COVID-19 presumption over the course of the last year or so from our special session until now. And they gave me some numbers, but one thing that, and I did tell them I'm running this amendment to extend the presumption, and they did not seem to indicate that there was necessarily a problem with any federal conflict or anything like that. Thank you, Madam Chairman.
Question on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1. Okay. Question being called. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has passed. Back on the bill. Are you? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwanitzer's, thank you. Motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File number 19 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, no. The bill has passed. Senate File 19 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Majority Leader, Floor Leader Summers.
Madam Chairwoman, thank you. I move that the House rise and report. Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, same sign. Oh, no. The motion has passed. Okay. Do I hit this? No? Forget that.
You give someone a hammer and they'll take a mile. Reading clerk, please read the committee of the whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your committee of the whole, having had on consideration bills on general file, beg leaves to report as follows. Senate File 148 do pass. Senate File 117 do pass. Senate File 83 do pass amended. Senate File 89 do pass. Senate File 102 do pass. Senate File 19 do pass amended. Representative Ottman, Chairman.
Representative Ottman.
I move the adoption of the committee of the whole report.
You've heard the motion to adopt the committee of the whole report. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Congratulations, Representative Ottman. All right, members, we're at that order of business, the signing of enrolled acts. Reading clerk, please read the enrolled act.
House Enrolled Act 45, or being original House Bill 1. An act relating to the supplemental appropriations and reduction of existing appropriations for the operation of state government for the fiscal biennium commencing July 1st, 2020 and ending June 30th, 2022. Providing definitions, providing for additional appropriations and transfers of funds for the period of the budget, increasing or decreasing certain amounts, adjusting the number of positions, modifying prior appropriations, providing for duties, terms and conditions, and other requirements relating to the appropriations for the period of the budget as specified. Providing for position and other budgetary limitations, requiring agreements between agencies, amending existing law by redirecting revenue and making transfers for the period of the budget. Creating a cryptocurrency staking program and advisory council, providing for matching funds relating to carbon capture, utilization, and storage projects, repealing prior appropriations and budget conditions, and providing for an effective date, being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
I'm about to sign enrolled act number 45, being original House Bill 1. I have so signed. As you can see, we have a courier service delivering the bill to the west end of the building. I think we have a privilege of the floor. Representative Yin.
Privilege of the floor, Mr.
Please
Speaker.
proceed.
Mr. Speaker, members, it is somebody's 71st birthday, I believe, today. It is a member from the Teton County delegation. He is our one member of Teton County that is not a Democrat in this chamber. And I believe his name is Representative Roscoe over in the far corner over here. So please wish Representative Roscoe happy birthday.
'59 has never looked so fit, Mr. Roscoe. 59. Any other privileges? Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House adjourn until 10 a.m. tomorrow, the 30th day of March, 2021.
Committee announcements. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Joint Conference Committee number 1 on House Bill 73 gestational agreements will meet tomorrow in room 110 upon adjournment.
Other committee announcements, I'm sorry, Representative Simpson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members, your Joint Conference Committee on House Bill 49 will meet tomorrow at 1 PM in room 113. Thank you.
Chairman Footner.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. Your Travel, Recreation, Wildlife, and Cultural Resources Joint Committee will meet at 12:30 tomorrow afternoon.
Thank you. Chairman Nicholas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Appropriations will meet on adjournment to hear Senate File 121. And at noon adjournment, we will have interim topics with our friends down the hall.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Any other? Vice Chair Larson, Lloyd.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your Select Committee on Tribal Relations will meet somewhere in the Capitol on Wednesday at noon. Stay tuned. We'll give you the place and the on that date. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other announcements? So members, I just have a couple announcements. Housekeeping. If you are interested in a formal bill signing, you need to make that request to the governor's office, not through our staff, but directly to the governor's office. Darlene at the governor's office handles those things. So please take care of that. And the governor I saw the list of bills, he's taking formal action on a dozen bills tomorrow. So if yours happens to be one of those and you want a formal, you got to get to him so they can make that arrangement. The other thing is, members, today at 2:30, Chief Clerk Harding sent out 6 concurrence requests. So 6 concurrence requests that we'll be taking up upon third reading, after third reading tomorrow. That's going to be our order of business. Second reading, third, hopefully every day. Second reading, third reading, concurrences, joint conference committees. So that's kind of how we'll try to line it up so that folks like Representative Fortner, who's joining remotely, and some of you maybe later this week and next week, you'll kind of know how we'll stay in that same order of business. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Mr. Speaker, so tomorrow's Committee of the Whole list will start out with 78, 75, 4, 66, 85, 111, 126, 139, 38, and Senate Joint Resolution 3, and it is subject to change as always.
Thank you. Members, any other business? Just also a reminder, Wednesday is last day committee. Bills out of committee, Thursday, last day committee of the whole. We're still going to make an effort to accelerate bills. So we're done with third readings, all third readings on Friday. So that next week you won't have to be, if you won't, we can get it all done. So if we need to do third readings next week, we certainly will. As you might have noticed, we waited and the Senate waited for us for House Bill 1 so that we can address anything on House Bill 1 this week, if there's any actions that the bodies might want to take up. So anyway, there's no other business for the body. Members, all those in favor of the Majority Floor Leader's motion that we adjourn until 10 a.m. Tuesday, March 30th, which will be our 29th day of the 66th Wyoming Legislature. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, no. Good work, ladies and gentlemen. We are adjourned.